Have you ever found yourself caught in the whirlwind of a workplace disagreement? Perhaps an email chain spiraling out of control, or maybe a tense family dinner turning into a full-blown argument right before the dessert. We all know that feeling, don't we? The sudden surge of heat, the quickening pulse, the urge to lash out or retreat, only to replay the scenario later, wishing you had responded differently, more calmly, more wisely. It's a common human experience, this feeling of being hijacked by our emotions in the face of conflict, leaving us drained and often regretting our automatic reactions. But what if there was another way? What if you could meet these moments not with a reactive surge, but with a quiet, unshakable strength? For centuries, an ancient philosophy called Stoicism has offered profound wisdom on mastering our inner world, especially in the turbulent waters of disagreements and disputes. It's a philosophy that doesn't promise to eliminate conflict from your life, because let's face it, that's simply impossible in a world full of diverse opinions and personalities. Instead, Stoicism offers an extraordinary framework for transforming how you respond to conflict, turning potential emotional chaos into opportunities for growth, understanding, and inner peace. It's about building an inner citadel, a fortress of character and resilience that no external storm can truly breach. As Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors, once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." He understood that our power doesn't come from controlling others or circumstances, but from mastering our own mind and reactions. He urged us not to be disturbed by external things, but by our judgment of them. This isn't just ancient philosophy, it's a practical, actionable blueprint for modern living, especially when our buttons are being pushed. In this video, we're going to dive deep into exactly 40 powerful, inner commands inspired by Stoic principles. These aren't mere suggestions, they are actionable directives, mental shifts, and practical techniques designed to reprogram your automatic responses to conflict forever. Each command is a stepping stone, guiding you away from knee-jerk reactions and towards thoughtful, virtuous responses that serve your highest self. We'll explore timeless wisdom from figures like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius himself, translating their profound insights into modern-day strategies you can start applying immediately. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand conflict differently, you'll have a complete toolkit to navigate it with grace, wisdom, and an inner calm that might just surprise you. So, if you're ready to stop the cycle of reactive regret and embrace a more empowered, intentional way of engaging with the inevitable conflicts of life, stay with me. This is where we begin to unlock that unparalleled inner strength. How often do you react instantly in an argument, only to regret it later? It's a common experience, that immediate, almost involuntary surge of emotion that bypasses our conscious thought and propels us into words or actions we often wish we could retract. This first command, the pause before reaction, is perhaps the most fundamental Stoic skill for navigating conflict. It's about building a crucial mental space between an external event and your internal response. This isn't about being slow or unresponsive, it's about being deliberate. The Stoics understood that our initial impressions are often misleading, clouded by emotion or incomplete information. They distinguished sharply between the initial impulse, which is natural and often outside our control, and our judgment about that impulse, which is entirely within our control. Epictetus, a former slave who became a profound Stoic teacher, famously taught that we should not be carried away by first impressions. He urged us to hold back, to examine these impressions, and to ask ourselves whether they are truly conducive to our well-being and virtue, or if they are simply knee-jerk reactions driven by fear, anger, or ego. This pause is where wisdom begins to assert itself over instinct. It's the moment you reclaim agency over your inner world. Think about a typical heated email exchange at work. Someone sends a message that feels accusatory or dismissive, and your fingers immediately start flying across the keyboard, crafting a sharp retort designed to put them in their place. But what if, in that moment, you applied the pause? Instead of hitting reply, you step away from the computer for 5 minutes. You take a few deep breaths, perhaps get a glass of water. In that brief interlude, the initial emotional charge often dissipates. You might reread the email more objectively, realizing the sender's tone might have been misinterpreted, or that their frustration stems from something unrelated to you. This small pause can prevent an escalation that could damage professional relationships and create lasting resentment. It allows you to formulate a response that is measured, factual, and aims for resolution rather than retribution. Consider a recent conflict you've experienced. Can you recall a specific moment where, if you had just paused, even for a few seconds, the outcome might have been entirely different? Perhaps a misunderstanding could have been clarified, harsh words left unsaid, or an argument diffused before it ignited into a full-blown blaze. That pause is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate expression of inner strength and self-mastery. It's the moment you choose reason over raw emotion, and that choice can fundamentally alter the trajectory of any conflict, leading to more constructive and peaceful resolutions. Imagine looking down from a mountain at a small stream. Conflicts are often like that stream. From far above, its twists and turns, its tiny rapids, and its momentary obstructions seem insignificant. They are there undeniably, but they do not define the vast landscape around them. This is the essence of command to see the bigger picture. It's about pulling back your perspective, widening your lens, and understanding that most of the disagreements, squabbles, and irritations that consume our immediate attention are, in the grand scheme of things, often just minor ripples in the vast river of life. The Stoics, particularly figures like the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, were masters of this cosmic perspective. They regularly reflected on the vastness of the universe, the endless march of time, and the interconnectedness of all existence. For them, looking up at the night sky or contemplating the immense scale of the cosmos wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was a practical tool for gaining equanimity. By consciously placing their present troubles against such an expansive backdrop, they could diminish the perceived urgency and emotional weight of daily conflicts. It helped them realize how fleeting human concerns truly are when viewed through the lens of eternity. This practice wasn't about denying the existence of problems, but about resizing them, ensuring they didn't overwhelm one's inner peace. Seneca, another towering figure in Stoicism, eloquently captured this sentiment when he wrote about the brevity of life and the triviality of most disputes. He often reminded his readers that our time here is limited, and to expend that precious time on petty grievances or arguments over non-essentials is a profound waste. When you reflect on how quickly days turn into weeks and years into decades, many of the things we intensely argue about lose their grip. That minor disagreement with a colleague, that snarky comment from a family member, or that frustrating incident in traffic might feel monumental in the moment, but how much significance will it truly hold when you look back a year from now, or even a month? Consider a scenario where you're caught in a petty argument with a neighbor over something trivial, perhaps a misplaced trash can or a slight misunderstanding about property lines. In the heat of the moment, it can feel like a grave injustice, something demanding immediate and forceful rectification. However, by stepping back and applying Command 2, you might reframe this minor dispute. You could think about your lifelong goals, your desire for a peaceful living environment, or even the brief span of your own existence. Does winning this small argument, potentially at the cost of long-term neighborly relations and your own inner tranquility, genuinely align with what you value most? Often, reframing such an issue in light of your broader aspirations and the limited time you have drastically diminishes its impact. It allows you to prioritize peace and constructive solutions over proving a point. So, the next time you find yourself embroiled in conflict, I encourage you to ask yourself a simple yet powerful question: will this matter in a year? Or even 5 years? This question acts as a powerful mental filter, helping you discern between issues that genuinely warrant your intense emotional energy and those that are better let go, allowing you to invest your finite attention and peace of mind in what truly counts. Not everything that bothers you is yours to fix. This simple truth lies at the heart of Command 3. Differentiate what is and isn't yours, and it is arguably the most fundamental principle in Stoic philosophy, a bedrock concept that can radically reprogram your response to conflict. Many of us spend an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy grappling with things entirely outside our sphere of influence, leading to frustration, anger, and a pervasive sense of helplessness. The Stoics recognized this debilitating pattern and offered a profound solution: focus relentlessly only on what is genuinely within your control and calmly accept everything else. This core teaching, often referred to as the dichotomy of control, was most famously articulated by the former slave and revered Stoic philosopher Epictetus. He taught that some things are within our power and others are not. Within our power are our opinions, impulses, desires, aversions, and, in a word, all our own actions. Not within our power are our bodies, possessions, reputations, commands, and, in a word, all things that are not our own actions. This distinction is utterly crucial. Your opinions, your judgments, your reactions, your choices, your values, these are yours and yours alone. You are the sovereign ruler of your inner world. However, the weather, the economy, other people's opinions of you, their actions, their feelings, their choices, these are externals. They are beyond your direct command, and attempting to impose your will upon them is an exercise in futility that only breeds suffering. Epictetus put it plainly, advising us to make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. He emphasizes that if we confuse these two categories, if we try to control what is not ours, we will inevitably be hindered, upset, and find fault with both gods and human beings. By contrast, if we limit our concern to what truly belongs to us, we will find freedom and tranquility. This isn't a passive acceptance of fate. It is an active, rational discernment of where our agency truly lies. It is an invitation to redirect our precious energy from fruitless struggles against reality to the fertile ground of our own character and choices. Consider a common conflict: receiving criticism, whether fair or unfair, from a supervisor at work. Your initial reaction might be anger, defensiveness, or a feeling of being undervalued. If you try to control your supervisor's opinion, their delivery, or even the fact that they chose to criticize you, you're stepping outside your circle of control. Those are their actions, their judgments. What is within your power, however, is your response. You can choose to listen calmly, to ask clarifying questions, to evaluate the feedback objectively, to decide whether it holds any truth that you can use for self-improvement, or to simply let it go if it is baseless. You can control your internal dialogue, your emotional state, and your subsequent actions. You cannot control whether the criticism was given or even if it was deserved. By focusing solely on handling your response with integrity and reason, you disarm the conflict's power to disturb your inner peace. So, reflect on a recent conflict, perhaps one that still lingers in your mind. Take a moment to list everything involved in that situation. Then, with clear distinction, draw a line between what was entirely within your control, your thoughts, words, and actions, and what was not, such as the other person's behavior, the outcome, or external circumstances. This exercise isn't just an intellectual one. It's a profound practice in reclaiming your power and redirecting your energy towards what truly matters, your own virtuous response. Reaction is automatic, response is intentional. The difference between these two words is not merely semantic. It represents a chasm in how we navigate conflict, a chasm the Stoics deliberately sought to bridge. To react is to be swept away by impulse, by the raw, untamed force of an immediate feeling: anger, fear, frustration. It's akin to a knee-jerk reflex, an instinctual lashing out that often leaves a trail of regret. When we react, we are not in control. We are controlled by our emotions, becoming puppets to external stimuli. But to respond, that is an act of deliberate choice, a conscious engagement of our higher faculties. It is stepping back, assessing the situation, and then choosing a course of action that aligns with our values and long-term goals. This distinction is profoundly linked to the Stoic ideal of living according to nature, which, for humans, means living according to reason. Unlike animals driven purely by instinct, humans possess the unique capacity for reason, the ability to pause, reflect, and make rational judgments. The Stoics believed that our true nature, our highest good, lies in cultivating this reason and allowing it to guide our lives, especially in moments of challenge and conflict. When we let emotions dictate our actions, we are, in their view, acting contrary to our nature, descending to a less developed state of being. We become slaves to our passions rather than masters of our inner selves. Therefore, the command to respond, don't react, is an invitation to reclaim our distinctly human capacity for rational thought and purposeful action, even when faced with provocation. The emperor-philosopher Marcus Aurelius, in his personal meditations, often grappled with this very challenge, emphasizing the power of rational action over passion. He famously reflected on how to maintain inner tranquility amidst the chaos of empire and the provocations of others. Marcus understood that while emotions are natural and unavoidable, allowing them to dictate one's behavior is a choice, one that often leads to folly and suffering. He urged himself, and by extension us, to cultivate a mental fortress, an inner citadel, where reason holds sway, untouched by the storms of external events or the fleeting disturbances of passion. For Marcus, every interaction, every potential conflict, was an opportunity to practice this rational control, to ensure that his actions were always guided by virtue and wisdom, not by raw, unthinking emotion. He sought to embody the principle that our power lies not in controlling external events, but in controlling our internal response to them. Consider a scenario in a heated debate, perhaps at a family gathering or a community meeting. A family member makes a provocative remark designed to push your buttons, or an opponent in the meeting dismisses your idea with a sarcastic comment. A reactive stance might involve snapping back immediately, raising your voice, launching a personal attack, or storming out in a fit of anger. This often escalates the conflict, burning bridges and leaving lasting damage. A thoughtful response, however, looks very different. Instead of allowing the emotional trigger to take over, you might take a deep breath, acknowledge the rush of anger, but consciously choose not to act on it. You might then calmly state your perspective, ask for clarification, or even acknowledge the other person's frustration without accepting their premise. For example, instead of yelling, "You always do this, you never listen," a reasoned response might be, "I understand you might disagree, but I'd appreciate it if we could discuss this respectfully without personal remarks." This keeps the focus on the issue, maintains your dignity, and prevents the conflict from spiraling out of control. It demonstrates that you are guiding your actions with an intentional, rational mind, rather than being dragged along by the tide of emotion. So, reflect on your most frequent conflicts, whether they occur at home, at work, or even in traffic. When you find yourself in these situations, pause for a moment and consider, what would a reasoned response look like here? How can I engage my rational mind before my emotions take over? What action or statement would best align with my deeper values of patience, understanding, and integrity, rather than simply satisfying a momentary urge to lash out or retreat? This isn't about suppressing emotion, but about directing it, harnessing it, and ultimately choosing reason as your guide. In conflict, are you trying to understand or to be right? This isn't just a rhetorical question. It cuts to the heart of what often prolongs and exacerbates disagreements. Many of us implicitly enter conflicts with the goal of winning or proving our point, viewing the interaction as a zero-sum game. But the Stoics, with their profound emphasis on virtue as the highest good, invite us to shift our objective entirely. They encourage us to prioritize seeking understanding and truth over merely claiming victory. This approach transforms conflict from a battleground into an opportunity for growth and connection, fostering harmony rather than division. It's about recognizing that genuine resolution often emerges not from one side dominating the other, but from both parties striving to grasp the full picture. The Stoic philosophy values harmony and truth-seeking as integral components of a virtuous life. For them, true wisdom doesn't reside in being able to overpower an opponent with arguments, but in the ability to discern truth, whether it originates from your own perspective or that of another. When we engage in conflict with an open mind, genuinely seeking to understand the other person's viewpoint, motivations, and underlying concerns, we align ourselves with this Stoic ideal. It moves us away from the ego-driven need to assert our own correctness and towards a more expansive, rational engagement with reality. This is not about capitulation or intellectual surrender, but about intellectual honesty and a commitment to resolving issues in a way that benefits all involved, or at least respects the differing perspectives that exist. It recognizes that sometimes the truth is multifaceted, residing somewhere between two initially opposing stances. The Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca, known for his wisdom on human nature, eloquently warned against the folly of quarreling for superiority. He observed that when our primary goal in a disagreement is to prove ourselves right, we often become deaf to reason and blind to the facts presented by the other party. Our minds close, our defenses rise, and the conversation devolves into a mere exchange of assertions, rather than a genuine dialogue aimed at mutual understanding. Seneca understood that such pursuits of superiority are empty victories, leaving us perhaps momentarily satisfied but ultimately isolated and no wiser. True strength in the Stoic view lies in the humility to admit when one might be mistaken, or simply to acknowledge the validity of another's experience, even if it differs from our own. It's about valuing the integrity of the conversation more than the satisfaction of winning a point. Consider a situation where you are discussing household responsibilities with a roommate or partner, and tension begins to build because one person feels unfairly burdened. Instead of immediately launching into a defense of your own contributions or a list of the other person's shortcomings, imagine shifting your approach. Instead of arguing, you might start asking open-ended questions like, "Can you tell me more about what specifically feels overwhelming for you?" Or, "Could you help me understand your perspective on how we've been dividing tasks?" You might even follow up with, "What changes do you think would make things feel more balanced for you?" These questions aren't designed to concede defeat, but to gather information, to truly see the situation through their eyes. By taking this empathetic stance, you move the conversation away from accusation and defense and towards shared problem solving. This act of seeking understanding, rather than merely stating your case or trying to win the argument about who does more, often diffuses the tension and opens the door for a constructive resolution that works for everyone. Reflect for a moment on a time when you were in a heated disagreement and somehow the tension suddenly lifted. Perhaps it was when you paused to genuinely listen, or when someone else surprisingly acknowledged your feelings. Can you recall a specific instance where understanding someone else's perspective, truly stepping into their shoes, completely diffused what felt like an escalating conflict? What was the outcome in that situation, and how did it change the dynamic for the better? The power of genuine empathy and a commitment to seeking truth is not just theoretical. It's a tangible force that can transform even the most entrenched disagreements. What if you expected disagreement and prepared for it calmly? This isn't about being pessimistic. It's about being profoundly realistic and proactive, a core tenet of Stoic philosophy known as negative visualization or premeditatio malorum. Most of us hope for smooth interactions, but when conflicts inevitably arise, we're often caught off guard, reacting emotionally and haphazardly. The Stoics, understanding human nature and the unpredictable turns of life, advocate for mentally rehearsing potential adversities before they strike. This practice doesn't invite trouble. It builds an internal fortress of resilience, making you less susceptible to the shock and emotional upheaval that conflicts often bring. By vividly contemplating how things could go wrong, you mentally inoculate yourself against their full impact, thereby reducing their emotional charge when they manifest. This method of imagining worst-case scenarios might sound counterintuitive or even morbid to some, but its power lies in preparation. It's about building resilience for your mind, much like physical training builds resilience for your body. When you've already considered a difficult outcome and mentally walked through how you might respond with reason and virtue, the actual event loses much of its sting. Instead of being blindsided by anger, accusation, or misunderstanding, you approach the situation with a degree of preparedness, a quiet strength that comes from having already faced the monster in your mind. This is not about succumbing to fear, but about mastering it. It's about being ready to face whatever life throws your way, particularly in the realm of interpersonal conflict, without being swept away by unbridled emotion. The Roman philosopher Seneca, in his insightful letters, often touched upon the wisdom of preparing for troubles in advance. He didn't suggest dwelling on negativity, but rather confronting potential difficulties head-on in your thoughts, thereby diminishing their power to surprise and overwhelm you. Seneca believed that much of our suffering comes not from the events themselves, but from our unexpected and uncontrolled reactions to them. By mentally rehearsing challenges, whether it's a heated argument, a critical boss, or a misunderstanding with a friend, we reduce the element of surprise that often triggers our most unhelpful emotional responses. This proactive mindset transforms you from a passive victim of circumstance into an active agent, ready to apply reason and virtue regardless of the external conditions. It's about training your mind to remain tranquil in the face of chaos, because you've already played out the difficult scenarios and chosen a virtuous response. Let's consider a practical application, visualizing a difficult conversation you need to have, perhaps with a colleague about a project deadline or with a family member about a sensitive issue. Instead of simply dreading it, take a few moments to mentally walk through the conversation. Imagine the other person reacting defensively, raising their voice, or dismissing your points. How would you maintain your composure? What rational responses would you offer? How would you focus on the facts and your desired outcome rather than getting drawn into emotional skirmishes? By playing out these possibilities and mentally rehearsing your calm, reasoned responses, you prepare yourself. When the actual conversation unfolds, you're not just reacting, you're responding with intention, having already processed some of the emotional turbulence in advance. This forethought allows you to approach the conflict not as a novel shock, but as a familiar challenge you've already considered and prepared for. As you reflect on this command, consider a future conflict you anticipate, or even a recurring one. Try taking a few minutes to mentally rehearse handling it with grace. Picture yourself maintaining a calm demeanor, listening attentively, speaking with clarity, and responding with reason, regardless of the other person's actions. What would that look like for you specifically? How would you choose to embody patience, courage, or justice in that moment? Envisioning yourself successfully navigating that difficult interaction can empower you to approach it with newfound confidence and poise. This mental rehearsal isn't about avoiding conflict, but about facing it with a stronger, more prepared mind, ready to uphold your inner peace and virtue. Every argument is a gym for your character. It's a bold statement, but one deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy, which doesn't just tolerate difficulties, but actively embraces them as essential for growth. In the Stoic worldview, conflict isn't merely an unavoidable nuisance. It's a crucible, a proving ground where our principles are tested and our virtues are forged. This perspective radically shifts how we approach disagreements, transforming them from sources of dread into valuable opportunities for self-improvement and the cultivation of inner strength. The core of this command lies in the Stoic concept of turning impediments into advantages. Imagine a river flowing around a rock. The rock doesn't stop the river, but rather, the river flows around it, carving it, changing its course, and ultimately becoming stronger for having navigated the obstacle. Similarly, a Stoic sees conflicts not as roadblocks to their peace, but as opportunities to practice wisdom, patience, justice, and self-control. When you find yourself in a disagreement, instead of seeing it as something to be endured or avoided, you can consciously reframe it as a chance to exercise these virtues, to see how well you can apply your philosophical training in real time. This isn't about enjoying conflict, but about recognizing its potential to refine you. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most famous Stoic emperor, put it succinctly when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This powerful insight means that the very things that seem to obstruct us, the conflicts that challenge our composure, are precisely what can propel us forward. They are the raw material for our development. A disagreement over priorities in a team meeting, that's an opportunity to practice clear communication and active listening. A tense exchange with a loved one, that's a chance to exercise empathy and restraint. Each moment of friction is a direct invitation to demonstrate wisdom, integrity, and courage. It's through wrestling with these challenges that we truly understand and embody our values, rather than merely intellectualizing them. Consider a professional disagreement, perhaps a clash of ideas on how to best approach a new project. Instead of viewing this solely as a hurdle, recognize it as an opportunity to sharpen your communication skills. You can practice articulating your viewpoint calmly and logically, listening attentively to your colleague's perspective, and finding common ground. This kind of interaction, though potentially stressful, becomes a training session for your mind. It allows you to develop patience when ideas are misunderstood, to cultivate intellectual humility when your own assumptions are challenged, and to foster fairness as you navigate differing opinions. The conflict itself becomes the very path to improving your ability to collaborate, influence, and lead effectively. So, as you encounter the next disagreement or conflict in your life, pause and ask yourself, how can this conflict help you become more patient or wise? How can it serve as a catalyst for developing your resilience, your empathy, or your ability to communicate with greater clarity? By consciously seeking these lessons, you transform a potentially negative experience into a powerful engine for personal growth, making every interaction, even a challenging one, a step forward on your Stoic journey. What costs more, being right or being at peace? This isn't a trick question, but a profound invitation to reevaluate our priorities during conflict. So often, we enter disagreements with an unspoken agenda: to win, to prove our point, to establish our correctness. Yet, this relentless pursuit of being right, even in minor squabbles, often comes at a steep price: our inner tranquility, our relationships, and sometimes our very sense of self. The Stoics understood this fundamental human tendency and urged us to cultivate humility, to release our attachment to being correct in every dispute, recognizing that ego often stands as the most significant barrier to genuine resolution and inner calm. This command asks us to consider whether the fleeting satisfaction of winning a verbal battle is worth the lasting disruption to our peace of mind. This principle ties directly into fundamental Stoic teachings regarding the ego and the relentless pursuit of inner tranquility. The Stoics believed that much of our suffering comes from wanting things to be other than they are, particularly when it comes to the actions and opinions of others. When we desperately cling to the idea that our perspective is the only valid one, we introduce a massive source of internal turbulence. Our peace then becomes conditional on others agreeing with us, a condition that is almost always beyond our control. This attachment to being right is a classic external, something outside our sphere of influence, and pursuing it above all else is a recipe for frustration and endless conflict. True Stoic wisdom encourages us to decouple our sense of worth from external validation, including the validation of being proven correct. The philosopher Epictetus captured this sentiment perfectly when he remarked on the vanity of winning arguments, noting, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. Don't wish to be thought to know anything, and if you are thought to be somebody, distrust it." This isn't an endorsement of intellectual laziness, but a powerful reminder that our internal state should not be dictated by the outcome of external debates. Our true victory lies in maintaining our character, our rationality, and our peace, regardless of whether our viewpoint prevails. Epictetus suggests that the desire to appear intelligent or correct is often a trap, diverting us from the more profound work of self-mastery and virtuous living. By releasing the need to always be seen as right, we free ourselves from a burdensome external dependency and strengthen our inner citadel. Consider a common scenario in a personal relationship. Perhaps you and your partner are discussing what route to take to a new restaurant. You firmly believe your GPS app has the best, fastest route, while your partner insists on a different way based on their supposed local knowledge. The discussion escalates, not because the destination is critical, but because each person feels a need to be validated, to be the one who knows best. Now imagine if, instead of digging in your heels, you simply offered, "You know what, let's try your way tonight. I'm happy to go with your suggestion." In this moment, by consciously conceding a minor point, you haven't admitted defeat. You have made a strategic move toward preserving harmony. The fleeting satisfaction of proving your GPS correct pales in comparison to the warm glow of a peaceful evening, free from unnecessary tension. This act of letting go fosters goodwill, demonstrates flexibility, and reinforces the idea that the relationship itself is far more valuable than any trivial victory. So take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. When you find yourself in the midst of a disagreement, consider what you truly gain by letting go of the need to win. Is it the calm assurance that you acted virtuously? Is it the preservation of a cherished relationship? Perhaps it's the quiet strength that comes from knowing your inner peace isn't dependent on external validation. By choosing peace over being proven right, you practice a profound form of self-mastery, aligning your actions with the Stoic ideal of a tranquil and rational life. In conflict, less is often more. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a profound principle deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy, urging us to apply discipline to our communication by being concise and intentional with every word we utter. Think about it. How many conflicts have escalated simply because one or both parties continued to speak, adding fuel to the fire with unnecessary explanations, emotional outbursts, or irrelevant details? The Stoics understood that words carry immense power, and that power can either build bridges or burn them down. They recognized that true strength in communication lies not in verbosity, but in precision, clarity, and the deliberate avoidance of superfluous speech. This command stems directly from the Stoic values of clarity and avoiding unnecessary entanglement. Stoicism is a philosophy of action and efficiency, both in thought and word. Just as a Stoic aims to live a life free from unnecessary desires and external dependencies, they also strive for communication that is direct, honest, and free from the clutter of emotion or exaggeration. They understood that rambling or overly emotional speeches often obscure the truth, confuse the issue, and invite further contention. To speak with purpose and brevity means to filter your thoughts, to distill your message down to its purest, most essential form, and to deliver it calmly and clearly. This approach honors both truth and tranquility, reducing the chances of misinterpretation and escalation. The ancient Stoics, particularly figures like Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, and Seneca, frequently emphasized the power of few, well-chosen words. While a direct quote from Zeno on this specific topic might be elusive, his teachings on logic and clear thinking inherently promoted concise expression. Seneca, however, explicitly advised against excessive talking, often praising those who could convey much in few words. He believed that profound truths often reside in simplicity, and that a disciplined mind would naturally lead to disciplined speech. Imagine the wisdom in holding back the torrent of angry words, allowing only the necessary ones to pass your lips. This practice demonstrates self-control, commands respect, and denies your opponent the emotional ammunition they might be seeking. Consider a scenario where you're caught in a heated discussion with a colleague about a project deadline. One approach might be to launch into a lengthy, emotional rant about their perceived incompetence, your overwhelming workload, and past grievances. This typically leads to defensiveness, further arguments, and a breakdown in communication. Now, imagine a different response, taking a deep breath, pausing for a moment, and then calmly stating, "I understand we have different perspectives on this deadline. My concern is that without specific resources, meeting it will compromise quality." This brief, calm statement is effective because it names the issue, expresses a concern without personal attack, and opens the door for a constructive conversation. It avoids the emotional noise, focuses on the core problem, and invites a reasoned solution rather than a prolonged emotional battle. It demonstrates that you are in control of your emotions and your words, which is a powerful message in itself. This command invites a powerful exercise in self-awareness. I encourage you to practice pausing before speaking in your next conflict or even in everyday conversations. Before you utter a single word, ask yourself, Is this necessary? Is this kind? Is this true? Is this helpful? By taking that moment, that small but significant pause, you create a space for reason to enter, allowing you to choose your words with precision and intention. This simple practice can transform not only how you engage in conflicts, but also the overall quality of your communication and your relationships. It's an act of deliberate self-mastery, ensuring that your speech serves your highest values rather than being driven by fleeting emotions. Fighting reality only amplifies your suffering. This potent truth stands as command number 10, urging us to embrace acceptance as a cornerstone of Stoic peace, especially in the throes of conflict. It's a profound realization that much of our distress doesn't come from external events themselves, but from our futile resistance to them. Imagine for a moment struggling against a powerful river current, trying to force it to flow uphill. Exhaustion, frustration, and eventual defeat are the only possible outcomes. In the same way, when we fight against the unchangeable aspects of a conflict, the other person's beliefs, their past actions, their unyielding nature, we only deepen our own suffering. The Stoics, with their keen understanding of human nature, taught that acceptance is not a passive surrender but an active wisdom in recognizing our limits. It's about discerning what genuinely lies within our sphere of influence and what does not. This isn't about giving up or condoning harmful behavior. It's about channeling our energy intelligently. If someone is determined to be angry or unreasonable, struggling against their anger won't make them less so. Our struggle only binds us to their emotional state. Instead, true power comes from accepting their behavior as an external, beyond our control, and then focusing entirely on our own internal response, our thoughts, our judgments, and our actions. This distinction frees us from the tyranny of external circumstances and places the locus of control firmly within ourselves. This concept resonates deeply with the spirit of the famous Serenity Prayer, a sentiment that perfectly encapsulates a core Stoic insight. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. While not a direct Stoic quote, this wisdom echoes throughout the writings of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus continually emphasized that we should only concern ourselves with what is up to us, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, and in short, whatever is our own doing. Everything else, he taught, is not up to us. This radical focus on internal control is the very essence of Stoic acceptance. It allows us to navigate the turbulent waters of conflict, not by trying to control the waves, but by steering our own ship with unwavering resolve and inner calm. Think of a common modern frustration, being stuck in a traffic jam. You're late, the cars aren't moving, and your blood pressure is rising. You might honk, yell, or frantically switch lanes, but none of these actions will make the traffic magically disappear. The traffic, like many aspects of a conflict, is an external event entirely beyond your immediate control. A Stoic response wouldn't be to rage against the unmoving metal, but to accept the reality of the situation. You might then choose to use the time productively, listen to an audiobook, practice mindful breathing, or simply observe the world around you. This doesn't mean you enjoy being stuck. It means you accept the unchangeable fact and redirect your energy towards what you can control, your attitude and your use of the present moment. Similarly, in human interactions, when faced with an unavoidable disagreement or another person's entrenched viewpoint, accepting their stance doesn't mean agreeing with it, but acknowledging its existence and focusing on how you will calmly and rationally respond from your own position of virtue. This shift from futile resistance to intelligent acceptance can transform a source of intense suffering into an opportunity for practicing patience and inner peace. Now take a moment to reflect on a recent conflict, large or small. Can you identify one specific aspect of that situation, one element of the disagreement, or one unyielding trait of the other person that you are desperately trying to change or resist? What was that one thing that, if you had simply accepted its reality, might have lessened your suffering or altered your response? Consider what it means to truly let go of that resistance. They are not malicious, they are human like you. This simple yet profound understanding forms command number 11, guiding us to practice empathy through our common humanity. It calls upon us to recognize that beneath the surface of anger, frustration, or stubbornness, the person you are in conflict with is a complex individual just like yourself, equally susceptible to mistakes, fears, and misunderstandings. When we cultivate this perspective, conflicts transform from battles against an enemy into nuanced interactions between two fallible beings. The Stoics held a remarkable view that people err not out of inherent evil, but out of ignorance. They believed that everyone naturally strives for what they perceive as good, even if their actions appear misguided or harmful to us. This isn't to say their actions are excused, but rather that understanding the root of their behavior, often an uninformed pursuit of their own perceived good, disarms our knee-jerk reaction to label them as inherently bad. Instead of seeing a deliberate attempt to cause harm, we begin to see a fellow human being navigating life with an incomplete map, making choices that, from their vantage point, seem logical or necessary. This deeper insight allows us to approach disagreements with a measure of compassion, reducing the impulse to retaliate or demonize. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, frequently reminds himself of this very principle. He repeatedly urges himself to love even those who wrong him, understanding that their actions stem from flawed judgment, not from a desire for malice. He writes about the importance of recognizing the shared rational faculty in all humans and extending goodwill, even when others act contrary to reason. This doesn't mean condoning injustice or allowing oneself to be a doormat. Rather, it means detaching from the emotional venom that often accompanies conflict and responding from a place of principled reason and understanding, recognizing the shared human condition that binds us all, regardless of the immediate disagreement. Consider a common scenario. A colleague misses a deadline, causing a ripple effect of stress for everyone involved. Your immediate reaction might be frustration or anger, perhaps even judgment about their competence or commitment. However, applying this command encourages you to pause and consider their humanity. What if they are dealing with a personal crisis at home, struggling with a family illness, or simply overwhelmed by an unmanageable workload that they are too afraid to articulate? By asking these questions, you begin to see beyond the immediate action to the potential stressors or fears driving their behavior. This shift in perspective doesn't negate the impact of the missed deadline, but it allows you to approach the conversation not with accusations, but with an attempt to understand and potentially collaborate on a solution. It fosters an environment where solutions are sought, rather than simply assigning blame. This deliberate act of imagining the other person's stresses or fears transforms a potentially explosive confrontation into an opportunity for constructive dialogue and mutual respect. Now take a moment to reflect on someone with whom you currently have a recurring conflict. Can you identify one underlying stressor, fear, or misunderstanding that might be influencing their behavior? What would it feel like to approach that person, not with judgment, but with a genuine desire to understand their perspective, their struggles, and their humanity, before even uttering a single word of your own argument? Sometimes a smile disarms more than an argument. This brings us to command number 12, using humor to diffuse tension. It's a powerful and often overlooked tool that can shift the energy of a conflict, transforming it from a rigid confrontation into a more flexible and approachable interaction. This isn't about being flippant or mocking the other person. Rather, it's about introducing a light-hearted element that can break the ice, lower emotional stakes, and create an opening for more constructive dialogue. Think of it as a subtle act of psychological judo, where you use the tension itself to your advantage, redirecting its force rather than meeting it head-on. While ancient Stoic texts don't explicitly list using humor as a command, the underlying principles of equanimity and rational perspective certainly support it. The Stoics valued a calm and balanced mind, one that isn't easily swayed by external disturbances. When a situation is charged with emotion, a well-placed, gentle joke or a self-deprecating comment can serve as a mental reset button. It reminds everyone involved that while the issue might be serious, the individuals are still human, capable of finding common ground and not taking themselves or the conflict so overwhelmingly seriously that it becomes an insurmountable wall. Seneca, in particular, often advised against excessive seriousness and urged his students to cultivate a balanced perspective, implying that even in weighty matters, a certain lightness of spirit could be beneficial. This lightness isn't about ignoring the problem, but about approaching it with a less rigid, more adaptive mindset. Consider a scenario in a team meeting where a project is behind schedule and frustrations are mounting. People are starting to speak over each other and the tension is palpable. Instead of adding to the seriousness with a stern remark, someone might say, "Well, it seems like our project is channeling its inner teenager. It's resisting all our deadlines and just wants to do its own thing." This isn't mocking the team or the problem. Instead, it acknowledges the difficulty with a touch of relatable humor. The immediate effect is often a collective chuckle, a brief moment of shared humanity that breaks the cycle of escalating stress. This small shift can make people more receptive to listening, more willing to collaborate, and less defensive in their contributions. It creates a temporary emotional buffer, allowing rational thought to re-enter the conversation. Another example might involve a personal disagreement with a friend or family member. Perhaps you are discussing plans and a misunderstanding leads to a heated exchange. One person might then quip, "Wow, it sounds like we're trying to communicate across different galaxies right now. Maybe we need a translator bot." This playful acknowledgement of the communication breakdown can instantly lighten the mood. It signals that despite the disagreement, the relationship itself isn't in jeopardy, and that both parties can still find moments of shared amusement. Unlike sarcastic or cutting remarks, which only inflame, genuine, gentle humor acts as a lubricant, easing the friction and allowing both sides to step back from the brink of an emotional outburst. It transforms the interaction from a personal attack into a shared challenge to be overcome. Now, think about a recent conflict you experienced, perhaps one that felt quite heavy or stuck. Can you identify any point in that conflict where a little bit of appropriate humor, a gentle, witty remark, or a moment of shared lightness might have helped to diffuse the tension and open up a different path for resolution? The only conflict is the one happening now. This powerful idea leads us to command number 13, focus on the present moment. Too often, when we find ourselves in an argument or disagreement, we aren't just dealing with the issue at hand. Instead, we unconsciously drag in baggage from the past, rehashing old grievances, forgotten slights, or previous failures. We also project anxieties into the future, imagining worst-case scenarios, fearing repercussions, or worrying about how this conflict might affect upcoming events. This mental time travel clouds our judgment and inflames emotions. turning a simple disagreement into a complex web of interconnected resentments and fears. Stoicism, however, teaches us the profound value of living and engaging in the here and now, bringing a calm clarity to even the most heated interactions. This command is deeply rooted in the Stoic practice of mindfulness, a careful, non-judgmental awareness of the present. For Stoics, dealing with what is directly before us is the only rational approach, because the past is gone and the future is uncertain and outside our control. By concentrating solely on the current situation, we prevent our thoughts from straying into unproductive territory. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, eloquently captured this idea when he wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." He urged us to focus all our energy and attention on the task at hand, to address only what is within our immediate sphere of influence, and to let go of what isn't pertinent to this very moment. This discipline of attention is particularly vital in conflict, where emotional responses can easily hijack our rational faculties if we allow our minds to wander. Consider a simple example, a couple discussing household chores. If one person brings up how their partner always leaves dishes in the sink, they are not addressing the current situation. They are adding years of perceived neglect to a minor point. The other person might then retort by mentioning a time the first person failed to take out the trash last week, piling on another layer of past grievances. Suddenly, what started as a conversation about a few dirty dishes has become a sprawling argument about historical imbalances in responsibility, past disappointments, and future concerns about fairness. Such a discussion quickly spirals out of control because neither party is focusing on the specific, present issue they could actually resolve. By staying anchored to the present, however, they could simply address the current dishes, perhaps discussing a revised system for the next day without opening old wounds. Similarly, in a professional setting, imagine a disagreement over a project deadline. If team members start dwelling on past project failures or express anxiety about how missing this deadline will damage their careers a year from now, the conversation becomes mired in fear and blame. The focus shifts from finding an immediate, practical solution to lamenting past misfortunes or predicting future catastrophes. A present-focused approach would involve acknowledging the missed deadline as a current problem, identifying the immediate next steps, and allocating resources to mitigate the impact without letting previous setbacks or future anxieties dictate the current urgent action. Staying present allows us to address the actual challenge directly, rather than fighting ghosts from the past or shadows of the future. This means actively noticing when your mind starts to drift during a conflict. Do you find yourself remembering what someone said to you 3 years ago, or are you imagining the worst possible consequence of this disagreement? When those thoughts arise, consciously pull your attention back to the current words being spoken, the emotions genuinely felt in this moment, and the specific facts of the immediate situation. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, take a moment to observe your thoughts. Are you adding past grievances or future anxieties to the current stress? Practice consciously bringing your attention back to what is happening right now, focusing only on the present challenge. Not every provocation deserves a reply. This insight guides us directly to command number 14, practice silence as a response. In the heat of conflict, our instinct is often to immediately counter, to defend, or to explain, fearing that silence implies agreement or weakness. Yet, the Stoics understood the profound power and quiet dignity inherent in choosing silence as a deliberate response, rather than allowing ourselves to be pulled into every skirmish. This isn't about avoiding the issue, but about exerting control over our own reactions and refusing to fuel a situation that does not serve our peace or the pursuit of reason. It's a testament to inner strength, demonstrating that our tranquility is not dependent on having the last word or winning every verbal exchange. This practice is deeply rooted in Stoic teachings on restraint and the importance of only engaging with what is truly necessary and within our control. For the Stoics, every word spoken should be carefully considered, serving a purpose that aligns with virtue, truth, or the common good. To speak out of anger, frustration, or a mere desire for retaliation is to betray our rational faculty and surrender to external provocations. Epictetus, the former slave who became a profound Stoic philosopher, often spoke about the foolishness of engaging with every critic or responding to every insult. He taught that by not reacting to every external stimulus, we deny it the power to disturb our inner peace. If someone hurls an insult and we choose not to engage, that insult loses its intended effect. It falls flat because we have refused to pick it up and internalize it. Our silence thus becomes a shield, protecting our inner citadel from the chaos of others' irrationality. Imagine this scenario: you are in a meeting and a colleague makes a dismissive comment about your work, perhaps intended to undermine your credibility. Your immediate impulse might be to launch into a detailed defense, to point out their flaws, or to express your indignation. However, choosing strategic silence in that moment allows you to control the narrative. If you respond with anger, you might inadvertently validate their attack or escalate the conflict into a personal dispute. By remaining silent for a beat, maintaining composure, and perhaps simply offering a calm, steady gaze, you communicate strength without uttering a single word. You deny the insult the oxygen it needs to burn, allowing it to dissipate into the air. This kind of silence isn't passive, it's an active decision, a powerful non-response that can disarm an aggressor far more effectively than any verbal retort. Consider also a personal interaction where a family member makes a cutting remark during a tense discussion. Instead of immediately firing back, pausing and choosing silence allows you several advantages. First, it gives you a moment to process your own emotions, preventing an automatic, regrettable reaction. Second, it shifts the burden of the next move onto the other person, often prompting them to reflect on their own words or to fill the silence with a more constructive comment. Third, and most importantly, it communicates that you are not easily provoked, that your dignity is self-contained and not dependent on their approval or disapproval. It's a powerful act of self-possession. This practice extends beyond direct personal attacks to situations where simply withholding comment can prevent unnecessary escalation. Perhaps someone is passionately arguing a point built on faulty assumptions. While it might be tempting to immediately correct them, a strategic silence can sometimes allow them to expose their own logical gaps, or for the conversation to naturally shift towards a more productive path. It helps you conserve your energy for battles that truly matter, distinguishing between trivial provocations and substantive issues that warrant your reasoned engagement. Try this in a low-stakes conflict soon. When you feel the urge to immediately respond, take a breath and consciously choose a moment of silence instead. Observe what happens both within yourself and in the interaction. Before blaming others, look to yourself. This isn't just a polite suggestion, it is the essence of command number 15. Reflect on your own faults first. It's a foundational Stoic practice that transforms how we engage with conflict by turning our critical gaze inward before it ever lands on another person. In the heat of an argument, our natural inclination is often to dissect the other person's shortcomings, to meticulously catalogue their errors, and to present our own blamelessness. But the Stoics understood that true progress, and indeed true peace, begins with rigorous self-examination. Self-awareness is not merely a virtue in Stoicism, it is the indispensable starting point for all improvement. Without understanding our own biases, our own vulnerabilities, and our own contributions to a disagreement, we are condemned to repeat the same patterns, always seeing the fault outside ourselves. This approach ensures that we are always learning, improving, and growing, rather than projecting our discomfort onto those around us. This rigorous self-assessment is powerfully articulated in the writings of Seneca. In his letters, particularly those to Lucilius, Seneca frequently advocated for a daily review of one's actions, words, and thoughts. He encouraged admitting errors not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of profound strength and a commitment to personal growth. Imagine each evening sitting down to honestly assess where you overreacted, where you spoke out of turn, or where your own pride contributed to a misunderstanding. This isn't about wallowing in guilt, but about learning from every interaction. The Stoics believed that by consistently observing and critiquing our own behavior, we gradually refine our character, making us less prone to rash judgments and emotional outbursts in future conflicts. It shifts the focus from an external battlefield to an internal training ground, where every conflict becomes an opportunity for self-mastery. Consider how acknowledging your role in a conflict can fundamentally change its dynamics. Let's say you're arguing with a colleague about a project deadline. Your initial instinct might be to blame their inefficiency or their unreasonable demands. However, if you pause and reflect, you might realize that you also contributed to the problem by not communicating your own constraints clearly upfront, or by perhaps overcommitting yourself. When you approach the conversation with a willingness to say, "I understand your frustration, and I also realize that I could have been clearer about my availability from the start," the entire tone shifts. It disarms the other person, turning a potential blame game into a collaborative problem-solving session. This isn't about taking all the blame, but about owning your part, however small, which often inspires the other person to reflect on their own contributions as well. It transforms a confrontational dynamic into one of mutual accountability and respect, paving the way for a genuine resolution. This command urges us to cultivate a habit of introspective honesty. It means resisting the immediate urge to defend ourselves or to point fingers, and instead asking ourselves uncomfortable questions first. Where did I act out of fear or anger? Did I truly listen, or was I just waiting for my turn to speak? Was my tone inflammatory, even if my words were technically correct? By taking this difficult but ultimately liberating step, we move beyond superficial arguments and address the deeper issues, both within ourselves and in our relationships. It's a challenging practice requiring humility and courage, but its rewards are immense: greater self-awareness, stronger relationships, and a profound sense of inner peace that comes from knowing you are constantly striving to be a better person. Take a moment to think about a recent disagreement you had. Can you identify even one small way you might have contributed to it, or how you could have responded more effectively? Not every hill is worth dying on. This simple yet profound statement encapsulates command number 16, choose your battles wisely. It's about applying discernment, a key aspect of Stoic practical wisdom, or phronses, to decide which conflicts truly warrant your energy and attention. In a world full of triggers and disagreements, it's easy to find ourselves pulled into countless skirmishes that ultimately drain our mental and emotional resources without yielding any meaningful outcome. The Stoics understood that our peace of mind is too precious to squander on every perceived slight or minor inconvenience. They advocated for a strategic approach to conflict, one that prioritizes what truly matters and allows us to conserve our inner tranquility for the challenges that genuinely demand our engagement. This command doesn't suggest avoiding all conflict, but rather becoming a shrewd allocator of your most valuable assets: your time, your peace, and your rational mind. This principle is deeply rooted in the teachings of figures like Marcus Aurelius, who constantly reminded himself to focus only on what is truly important. He understood that life presents an endless stream of potential distractions and minor irritations, and that to engage with every single one would be to lose sight of one's primary purpose, living a virtuous life. For the Stoic, the true battle is often internal, a struggle to maintain one's character amidst the chaos of external events. Therefore, external conflicts are evaluated not just on their immediate impact, but on their relevance to our core values and long-term goals. Is this conflict genuinely about justice, truth, or a principle worth defending, or is it merely a distraction born of ego or petty annoyance? By asking ourselves this fundamental question, we begin to filter out the noise and identify the true signals, ensuring that our efforts are directed toward what truly merits our attention. It is a powerful way to reclaim agency and prevent our days from being dictated by external provocations. Consider the stark difference between ignoring a rude comment and addressing a serious ethical issue. Imagine you're walking down the street and someone makes an offhanded, impolite remark about your appearance. Your initial reaction might be a surge of anger, a desire to retort, to win the interaction. However, a Stoic practicing command number 16 would quickly assess the situation. Does this comment truly threaten your well-being or principles? Is engaging in a verbal spat with a stranger going to improve your day, their day, or the state of the world? Likely not. In this scenario, choosing to ignore the comment, to let it pass like a cloud in the sky, is a wise decision. It preserves your peace and energy for more important matters. Now, contrast that with witnessing a colleague engaging in unethical behavior that could harm others or undermine the integrity of your organization. This is not a trivial matter. This is a conflict that touches upon fundamental principles of justice and responsibility, values that a Stoic would consider worth defending. Engaging in this conflict, even if difficult, aligns with the pursuit of virtue and the well-being of the wider community. The wise choice here is to speak up, to address the issue thoughtfully and courageously, recognizing that some battles are indeed worth fighting. This discernment isn't about being passive or a doormat, it's about being strategically engaged. It means developing an inner compass that guides you toward meaningful actions and away from pointless skirmishes. It requires a clear understanding of your own values and priorities, so you can quickly filter through the myriad of daily provocations. By cultivating this habit, you empower yourself to respond to life with intention, rather than being swept away by every current of disagreement. It frees up tremendous psychological space, allowing you to focus on growth, contribution, and truly meaningful relationships. Take a moment to reflect on your own recent conflicts. Which ones genuinely contributed to something important, and which were ultimately unnecessary drains on your spirit? Identifying these patterns is the first step toward reclaiming your peace. Strip the story from the situation. This is the essence of command number 17. Use objective language, a powerful Stoic practice for navigating conflict with clarity and calm. So often, when we find ourselves in disagreement, our emotions hijack our perception, transforming simple facts into dramatic narratives laden with intent and judgment. We weave intricate tales of how others meant to offend us, how they always behave a certain way, or how a minor inconvenience is actually a deliberate attack. The Stoics, however, understood that our suffering often stems not from the event itself, but from the story we tell ourselves about it. They sought to see things exactly as they are, uncolored by our fears, desires, or preconceived notions. By describing events without emotional charge and sticking rigorously to the facts, we disarm much of the conflict's power to disturb our inner peace. This approach is deeply rooted in the Stoic commitment to rationality and their understanding of how our judgments shape our reality. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, taught that we are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the opinions we hold about those things. He emphasized the importance of distinguishing between an impression and our assent to it. An event occurs, an impression forms, but we have a crucial moment to decide whether to accept that impression at face value, along with all its emotional baggage, or to examine it critically, stripping away the judgment to reveal the bare facts. This discipline of objective representation allows us to respond to reality, not to our agitated interpretation of it, thereby preventing countless conflicts from escalating unnecessarily. It's about becoming a neutral observer of the situation, detaching ourselves from the immediate emotional tug, and instead focusing purely on what can be verified and described without subjective overlay. Let's consider a common scenario to illustrate the profound difference this command can make. Imagine you are in a discussion and someone cuts you off mid-sentence. Your immediate, emotionally charged thought might be, "You are so rude, you always interrupt me and never let me finish." This statement is packed with judgment, generalization, and emotional accusation, instantly escalating the tension. It's a story you've created about the person's character and their past behavior. Now, let's rephrase that using objective language, as command number 17 encourages. "You interrupted me." This simple, factual statement describes only the event that occurred. It contains no judgment about the other person's character, no generalization about their past actions, and no emotional overlay. The former statement invites a defensive, heated response, likely prolonging the conflict. The latter statement, "You interrupted me," allows for a calm, rational discussion about the communication pattern, creating an opening for resolution rather than further disagreement. The difference is subtle in words but monumental in its impact on the interaction. Another powerful illustration comes from a workplace disagreement. Perhaps a colleague misses a deadline, causing a delay in your project. An emotional response might be, "You are so unreliable and irresponsible. You always do this, and now you've ruined everything." This is a narrative filled with blame and catastrophic predictions. An objective statement would be, "The deadline for the report was Friday, and it has not been submitted." This will delay the next phase of the project by 2 days. This statement sticks to the verifiable facts, the deadline, the non-submission, and the direct consequence. There is no accusation of character, no exaggeration of impact, just a clear description of the situation. This factual framing allows both parties to address the actual problem, the missed deadline and its effects, rather than getting sidetracked by defensiveness or personal attacks. This practice extends beyond direct verbal confrontations. When you find yourself stewing over a conflict, take a moment to consciously rephrase your internal monologue. Instead of thinking, "They deliberately ignored my advice because they don't respect me," try, "My advice was not implemented." Instead of, "This person is trying to undermine me," think, "This person took an action that impacted my work." By stripping away the layers of interpretation and perceived motive, you create mental clarity. This isn't about denying your feelings, but about acknowledging them while simultaneously choosing to engage with the factual reality, rather than a distorted, emotionally charged version. It's an active exercise in mindfulness and rational control, building a mental buffer that protects your tranquility. I encourage you to try this in your own life. Think of a recent emotional statement you made or even just thought during a conflict. Now, how could you rephrase it neutrally, sticking only to the observable facts, free from judgment, blame, or exaggeration? This simple rephrasing can be a profound step toward transforming your approach to conflict. What can you be thankful for in this moment of tension? This might sound counterintuitive, almost absurd, when you're embroiled in a conflict, but command number 18, practice gratitude mid-conflict, encourages us to do precisely that. It's a radical shift in perspective, one that the Stoics deeply understood as essential for maintaining our inner tranquility and wisdom. When emotions flare and positions harden, our tunnel vision tends to narrow to only the negative aspects of the situation, amplifying our distress and making resolution seem impossible. But by consciously shifting our focus to what remains good, even amidst the contention, we can broaden our perspective, temper our emotional responses, and approach the disagreement from a more grounded and resilient place. This isn't about ignoring the problem. It's about refusing to let the problem consume your entire mental landscape. This command links directly to core Stoic practices for cultivating contentment and inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics were not optimists in the modern sense, blindly hoping for the best. Instead, they were realists who sought to find reason and value in everything that occurred, including adversities. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, often wrote about the importance of finding good in every situation, no matter how challenging. He understood that our attitude toward events largely determines their impact on us. Even in the midst of conflict, there are often underlying opportunities or silver linings that we overlook because we are too focused on the perceived slight or disagreement. By actively seeking these out, we draw strength and clarity from an otherwise draining experience. It's a powerful act of cognitive reframing, where you consciously choose to direct your attention away from what is missing or problematic toward what is still present and valuable. This practice strengthens our ability to see challenges not just as burdens, but as integral parts of our journey, each carrying a hidden lesson or a chance for growth. Consider a practical example. You are in a heated argument with a loved one. The tension is palpable and every word feels like a weapon. Instead of just spiraling into anger or resentment, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what can I be grateful for right now? Perhaps you are grateful for the opportunity to practice patience, a virtue you've been striving to cultivate. Maybe you are grateful that this person cares enough to engage with you, even if clumsily, rather than simply walking away. You might even feel a flicker of gratitude for the very conflict itself, as it highlights an area in your relationship that needs attention and growth. This isn't about denying the difficulty of the argument, but about recognizing the deeper, underlying values that are still present. This small act of gratitude can act as an emotional circuit breaker, allowing you to breathe, recalibrate, and respond with greater wisdom. It allows you to approach the conflict not as a battle to be won, but as an experience that, like all experiences, can contribute to your development. Or imagine a workplace dispute where a colleague unfairly criticizes your contribution to a team project. It's tempting to feel indignation and anger. Yet, if you apply this command, you might find gratitude for the feedback, however poorly delivered, as an opportunity to review your work more critically. Perhaps you are grateful for the chance to demonstrate your composure under pressure, or for the opportunity to articulate your position more clearly. You might even be grateful that the conflict is out in the open, allowing for clarification and potentially a better working relationship in the long run. By allowing gratitude to infuse your perspective, you prevent the emotional hijacking that so often characterizes conflict. It's a way of saying, yes, this is difficult, and yet I can still find something to appreciate, something that contributes to my growth or the overall good. This nuanced approach helps to prevent the conflict from consuming your mental resources and emotional well-being, allowing you to remain anchored and purposeful. So I invite you to try this powerful command. Think about a current conflict, big or small, that you're experiencing or reflecting on. Now dig deep and find one positive aspect, however tiny, in that situation. It could be the chance to exercise a virtue, the clarity a disagreement brings to an issue, or even just the experience of standing firm in your values. What is one thing you can genuinely be grateful for, even in this challenging moment? This reflective practice can profoundly alter your emotional landscape and pave the way for more constructive engagement. Words like always and never fuel fires. They are the linguistic accelerants that escalate a minor disagreement into a blazing inferno. This brings us to command number 19, avoid generalizations and labels. The Stoics understood that precision in thought leads to precision in speech, and imprecise, hyperbolic language is a direct pathway to misunderstanding and heightened conflict. When we reach for absolute terms, you always do this, you never listen, or we aren't just commenting on a single action. We're launching a global criticism that attacks the other person's character, not just their behavior. This isn't just inaccurate, it's deeply inflammatory, pushing people onto the defensive and shutting down any chance of productive dialogue. It transforms a specific issue into an insurmountable personal flaw, making resolution nearly impossible. The Stoics consistently emphasized the importance of seeing things as they truly are, stripped of our emotional projections and irrational exaggerations. Epictetus, for instance, frequently warned against the danger of false impressions, those distorted interpretations that lead us astray. When we generalize, we are allowing our frustration or anger about one incident to bleed into a sweeping, unfair indictment of another person's entire pattern of behavior. This kind of thinking prevents us from addressing the actual issue at hand because we've polluted the conversation with hyperbole. Instead of stating a verifiable fact, we're presenting an emotional interpretation as truth, which inevitably leads to arguments about the accuracy of the generalization rather than the core problem itself. This is akin to trying to solve a specific engineering problem by blaming the entire concept of engineering it's unproductive and fundamentally misdirected. Consider the stark difference between two ways of expressing dissatisfaction. You could say, "You always forget to take out the trash." This phrasing isn't merely about the trash. It's an assault on the other person's reliability, memory, and perhaps even their care for shared responsibilities. It's likely to be met with an immediate defensive retort like, "No, I don't always forget. What about last Tuesday?" And just like that, the conversation veers off course, becoming a debate about the historical accuracy of your generalization rather than a discussion about the forgotten trash. Now contrast that with, "You forgot to take out the trash this time." This statement is specific, factual, and non-judgmental. It addresses the behavior without broad accusations, leaving room for a constructive conversation about how to prevent it from happening again. The difference is profound. One incites anger and defensiveness, the other invites understanding and problem-solving. This Stoic precision allows us to keep our focus squarely on the issue, fostering an environment where solutions can be sought rather than grievances aired. This command extends beyond just avoiding always and never. It also applies to labeling people or situations in broad, derogatory terms during conflict. Instead of saying, "You're being completely unreasonable," which is a label that invites resistance, a more Stoic approach might be, "I'm having trouble understanding your reasoning on this point." The latter focuses on your own experience and the specific issue, rather than globally judging the other person's character or mental state. When we label, we reduce a complex individual or situation to a single, often negative characteristic, which dehumanizes the person and oversimplifies the problem. The Stoics recognize that every individual has the capacity for reason, and even when someone is behaving poorly, they are still a human being, a part of the greater human community. Labels create separation, specific observations invite connection and clarity. So, as you navigate your next disagreement, pay close attention to the language you use, both internally and externally. How often do you find yourself reaching for those sweeping, judgmental terms? I encourage you to notice when you use absolute terms in disputes, when you catch yourself thinking or saying, always or never, pause and rephrase. Can you pinpoint the specific action or instance that prompted your frustration? Can you describe the behavior without generalizing it across all time and all circumstances? This seemingly small shift in your communication style can have a monumental impact on the dynamics of your conflicts, transforming them from fiery battles into opportunities for clear, respectful dialogue. It's a powerful move towards greater clarity, compassion, and ultimately more harmonious resolutions. Peace is a muscle, and just like any muscle, you have to exercise it regularly if you want it to be strong enough to carry you through the challenges of conflict. This brings us to command number 20, cultivate inner resilience through practice. It's easy to talk about staying calm in a conflict, but when emotions run high, your actual capacity for calm is tested. The Stoics understood that true tranquility isn't something you can just access on demand if you haven't built it up over time. It comes from consistent, deliberate, and habitual practice. It's not enough to intellectually understand these commands. You have to train yourself to embody them. Think of it as emotional conditioning. Just as an athlete trains their body daily for competition, a Stoic trains their mind daily for life's inevitable challenges, including disagreements and confrontations. The wisdom of Seneca echoes this sentiment perfectly when he advises us to prepare for storms in calm weather. He wasn't just talking about abstract philosophical concepts. He was speaking to the very practical need to build up our inner strength when things are going well, so that when adversity strikes, we aren't completely blindsided or overwhelmed. If you wait until you're in the middle of a heated argument to try and remember to pause, differentiate, control, or avoid generalizations, it's often too late. Your emotional state will likely override your best intentions, but if you've been practicing these disciplines daily, even in small ways, they become second nature. They become your default response mechanisms, the well-worn grooves in your mind that your thoughts automatically follow, even under pressure. This consistent effort fortifies your inner core, making you less susceptible to being shaken by external agitation. So, how do you actually put this into practice? One highly effective method is daily mindfulness. This doesn't require hours of meditation. Even 5 to 10 minutes each morning can make a profound difference. During this time, you simply observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment, noticing how they arise and pass. This practice helps you build a crucial gap between stimulus and response, making that pause before reaction much more accessible during a real conflict. Another powerful tool is journaling. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to reflect on any interactions that caused you friction or discomfort. Ask yourself, how did I respond? Was it in line with Stoic principles? What could I have done differently? This reflective practice isn't about self-criticism, but about continuous improvement, reinforcing positive mental habits and gently correcting unhelpful ones. It's a silent, internal rehearsal for future conflicts, refining your approach with each entry. A practical example of cultivating resilience might involve intentionally seeking out minor discomforts or challenges in a controlled environment. This isn't about creating conflict, but about building your capacity to handle it. For instance, if you dread public speaking, take small steps to practice it, like speaking up more in meetings or joining a local Toastmasters group. This exposure, even to low-stakes challenges, strengthens your ability to manage anxiety and pressure. or if you find minor annoyances highly aggravating, make a conscious effort to observe your reaction without judgment and deliberately choose a calmer response. These small daily efforts accumulate, building a robust inner fortress that protects your peace of mind, not by avoiding conflict, but by enabling you to meet it with unwavering composure. I encourage you to commit to just one small daily practice for resilience this week. It could be 5 minutes of mindful breathing, journaling about a recent interaction, or even just consciously practicing patience when faced with a minor frustration. The consistent effort, however small, is where true transformation begins. The facts are neutral, your story is optional. This powerful idea is command number 21, see the event, not the story. In every conflict, there's what actually happened, and then there's the narrative we construct around it, the meaning we assign, the assumptions we make, the emotions we attach. More often than not, it's not the event itself that causes us distress, but the story we tell ourselves about it, especially the stories that fuel anger, resentment, or fear. The Stoics were masters at this mental exercise, constantly striving to break down their impressions into their bare, objective components. They understood that our minds are powerful storytelling machines, and while this can be a great asset in many areas of life, it can also be a significant source of conflict and suffering if left unchecked. Epictetus brilliantly captured this when he taught that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by our opinions about those things. When someone says something cutting, it's just a sequence of sounds. When a colleague misses a deadline, it's a specific action. The sting, the anger, the worry, these come from the interpretation we layer on top of the simple event. We might tell ourselves, they did that deliberately to undermine me, or this person always disrespects me, or this will ruin everything. These stories, often created in an instant, are what truly escalate internal and external turmoil. Consider a practical example like receiving criticism. The raw event is simply someone expressing an opinion about your work or behavior. It might be direct, even harsh. If you immediately interpret this as they think I'm incompetent, they're attacking me personally, or this means I'm a failure, then your internal story has instantly transformed a neutral event into a personal threat. This story triggers an emotional defensive reaction, making it incredibly difficult to respond constructively. But what if you saw the event, not the story? What if you heard the words and simply noted them as data? They expressed a specific opinion about this aspect of my work. This objective observation allows you to detach from the emotional charge. When you strip away the judgment and the personal attack, what remains are just words, just information. This isn't to say criticism is always easy to hear, but by seeing it for what it is, an external event, you gain the space to decide how you want to respond, rather than being swept away by an automatic, story-driven reaction. This command empowers you to become an observer of your own thoughts, rather than a prisoner of them. When you feel that familiar rush of anger or sadness during a conflict, pause and ask yourself, what is the bare event here? And what story am I currently telling myself about it? How much of my distress is coming from the actual facts, and how much is coming from the interpretation, the judgment, or the assumption I've added? This practice allows you to challenge your narratives, to consciously choose a different, more constructive story, or even to decide that no story is needed at all. It's a way of reclaiming your mental sovereignty, understanding that while events happen, the meaning you assign to them is always within your control. So take a moment now and strip a recent conflict down to its bare, objective facts. What really happened, devoid of all the emotional overlays and personal interpretations? You might be surprised at how much less disturbing the pure event becomes. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. This seemingly simple phrase encapsulates Command 22, practice voluntary discomfort. It's an invitation to intentionally step outside your comfort zone in small, manageable ways, not to suffer needlessly, but to build mental and emotional resilience. Think of it as preventative medicine for your soul. Just as athletes train their bodies by deliberately pushing past current limits, Stoics understood that the mind also needs to be strengthened through exposure to minor hardships. This practice is known as ascesis, which translates to training or discipline. It's about hardening yourself against the inevitable shocks and conflicts of life, so that when a real challenge arises, you're not caught off guard and overwhelmed. The Stoics like Musonius Rufus and Seneca weren't advocating for self-flagellation or seeking out genuine suffering. Instead, they recognized that by occasionally depriving ourselves of small luxuries or intentionally enduring minor inconveniences, we weaken the hold that external circumstances have over our inner peace. For example, Musonius Rufus encouraged practices like walking in all weather, enduring hunger and thirst for short periods, or wearing simple clothes. These aren't meant to be heroic acts of martyrdom, but rather quiet, personal tests that remind us of our inner strength and independence from external comforts. When you choose to take a cold shower or walk instead of drive a short distance or skip a meal, you're telling yourself, I can choose to be okay even without this. This subtle internal message builds a profound sense of self-sufficiency. This deepens your capacity to handle conflict because it lessens your fear of adversity itself. Many of our conflicts escalate because we dread the discomfort associated with them, the awkwardness of confrontation, the sting of criticism, the vulnerability of sharing a difficult truth. By regularly engaging in voluntary discomfort, you train yourself to tolerate these feelings. The small acts of self-discipline become little victories that build confidence in your ability to withstand greater pressures. When you've consciously chosen to sit with a bit of hunger, a chilly breeze, or the boredom of silence, the discomfort of an argument starts to feel less terrifying, less overwhelming. You realize you can endure it too and emerge stronger. So, how does this translate into practical application for conflict? Consider intentionally engaging in a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, not because you enjoy it, but specifically to practice navigating that discomfort. This isn't about picking fights, but about confronting necessary yet unpleasant interactions with a calm, purposeful mindset. For instance, if you usually shy away from giving constructive feedback, choose one low-stakes situation this week to deliver it gently but directly. Or if you tend to interrupt people when you feel impatient, deliberately practice sitting in silence and letting them finish their thoughts, even if it feels uncomfortable to hold back your immediate response. These acts of voluntary engagement with minor social discomforts are powerful training grounds. They are opportunities to build the mental fortitude that allows you to remain composed and rationally engaged when real tensions arise. Take a moment to think about one small voluntary discomfort you can embrace this week. Perhaps it's saying no to a minor request that you'd usually agree to out of habit, or choosing a slightly harder path in your daily routine. By consciously leaning into these small challenges, you're fortifying your inner citadel against the larger conflicts that life will inevitably present. Imagine looking at Earth from space, how small our disputes seem from that incredible vantage point. This brings us to Command 23, and it's a powerful Stoic practice called the view from above. This technique isn't just a philosophical exercise. It's a mental tool designed to instantly reduce the perceived importance and emotional charge of our conflicts by mentally zooming out and seeing them from a cosmic perspective. When we are embroiled in an argument, our focus tends to narrow dramatically. the conflict fills our entire mental landscape, consuming our thoughts and emotions, making it feel like the most significant event in our lives. The view from above expands that landscape, reminding us of the vastness of the universe and the fleeting nature of our individual lives and their associated squabbles. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, frequently employed this kind of visualization. He understood that our anxieties and conflicts often stem from a distorted sense of their scale. By contemplating the immensity of time and space, we can recalibrate our perspective. For instance, he wrote about looking at things from the perspective of all time and all existence, recognizing that human life itself is but a tiny point and our struggles even smaller. This isn't about trivializing genuine problems or dismissing suffering. It's about gaining equanimity. It helps us avoid becoming overwhelmed by the immediate present and reminds us that most of what we fret over will be utterly inconsequential a century from now, let alone a millennium. It's a way of saying, yes, this conflict feels huge right now, but how does it truly stack up against the history of the cosmos, or even just the span of your entire life? Let's consider a practical application, a heated workplace disagreement. Perhaps you're arguing with a colleague over project ownership or a minor procedural error. In the moment, it might feel like the most critical thing, threatening your career, your reputation, or even your sanity. Emotions run high, and the desire to be right can be overwhelming. Now apply the view from above. Imagine your workplace, then your city, then your country, then the entire planet, shrinking in the vastness of space. Contemplate the billions of years that have passed and the billions more that will come. Where does this particular argument fit into that immense tapestry? It becomes a speck, almost invisible. This mental exercise doesn't solve the problem, but it profoundly changes your emotional response to it. It dissolves much of the anger, the frustration, and the anxiety, allowing you to approach the situation with a clearer, calmer mind. By regularly practicing this panoramic view, you train your mind to pull back from the immediate emotional intensity of a conflict. You realize that your personal dramas, while important to you, are not the center of the universe. This humility is not self-deprecating, it's liberating. It frees you from the tyranny of the present moment's perceived urgency and allows you to respond with greater wisdom and less emotional entanglement. It's a profound way to step out of the emotional quicksand of conflict and find solid ground. So, take a moment now. Think of a current conflict or a persistent annoyance in your life. Close your eyes and visualize it from a distant perspective. How does it look from high above, from the vastness of space? What insights emerge when you see it as just one tiny part of an immense and ongoing story? We are all leaves on the same tree, reaching for the same sun, even if our branches sometimes intertwine uncomfortably. This powerful metaphor brings us to Command 24, practice sympathy, a profound Stoic concept of interconnectedness. While the view from above helps us zoom out spatially and temporally, sympathy encourages us to zoom in on our shared humanity, recognizing that we are all integral parts of a single, universal whole. In moments of conflict, it's incredibly easy to fall into us versus them thinking. We demonize the other person, seeing them as fundamentally different, flawed, or even malicious. This tribalistic mindset hardens our positions and makes resolution almost impossible. Sympathy offers an antidote to this divisive tendency, urging us to remember that beneath our disagreements, we are all fellow citizens of the cosmos, bound together by our common nature and existence. The Stoics believed that reason is universal, a divine spark present in every human being. This means that even the person you are currently clashing with possesses this same rational capacity, even if they are acting irrationally in the moment. Marcus Aurelius, deeply reflecting on sympathy, wrote extensively about the interconnectedness of all things and how humans are naturally social beings designed for cooperation. He understood that harming another is, in a very real sense, harming oneself, just as a hand cannot fight the foot without injuring the body it belongs to. This isn't just fluffy sentimentality. It's a pragmatic recognition that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. If we constantly engage in hostile conflicts, we create a world that is less harmonious and ultimately less conducive to our own flourishing. Consider a practical application of sympathy in a conflict. Let's say you're having a heated debate with a neighbor over a boundary line, or an online argument with a stranger about a political issue. Your immediate impulse might be to attack their intelligence, their motives, or their character. But what if instead you intentionally saw your opponent as a fellow traveler through life, facing their own struggles, fears, and aspirations just like you? Perhaps they are stressed about their finances, or they recently lost a loved one, or they are simply trying to protect what they believe is theirs, much like you are. This doesn't mean you agree with their position or condone their behavior, but it allows you to approach the conflict with a foundation of shared humanity rather than outright antagonism. It shifts the dynamic from a battle against an enemy to a challenge shared with another human being. By actively practicing sympathy, you cultivate compassion even when it feels difficult. It enables you to look beyond the immediate provocation and acknowledge the shared underlying vulnerabilities and desires that drive human action. When you recognize the inherent worth and common ground you share with another person, even in disagreement, it becomes far more challenging to engage in destructive conflict. Instead, you're more likely to seek understanding, find common goals, and work towards a resolution that respects the dignity of all involved. It's a powerful way to reduce the inherent otherness that fuels so many disputes. So, take a moment to reflect. Can you find one common goal, one shared aspiration, or one aspect of shared humanity with someone you are currently in conflict with? What new possibilities emerge when you see them not as an adversary, but as a fellow human being navigating the complexities of life alongside you? Assume ignorance before malice. This simple yet profound principle is the cornerstone of Command 25, Delayed Judgment. How often do we jump to conclusions about someone's intentions, immediately assigning them the worst possible motive for their actions? It is a natural human tendency to fill in the blanks with our own anxieties and biases, especially in the heat of a conflict. But this hasty judgment is a fertile ground for unnecessary escalation, turning a misunderstanding into a full-blown confrontation. The Stoics understood this psychological trap centuries ago, advocating for a deliberate suspension of judgment until all the facts are in. They taught us that our initial impressions, often clouded by emotion and incomplete information, are rarely the full truth. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus was particularly vocal about the dangers of assenting to premature impressions. He advised us not to immediately agree with the first thought that enters our mind about a situation, especially when it involves others. Instead, he urged us to pause, to question that impression, and to seek further clarity before forming an opinion or, more importantly, acting on it. This isn't about being naive or overly trusting. It's about being rational and measured. It's about recognizing that our perceptions are often distorted and that our interpretations of events are not the events themselves. When we assume bad intent, we not only provoke conflict where none might exist, but we also close ourselves off to understanding, making reconciliation or even civil discourse nearly impossible. Think about a common scenario. A friend arrives late to a dinner you arranged. Your immediate, emotionally charged thought might be, they don't respect my time, or they don't care about our friendship. This is a judgment, a conclusion drawn from an incomplete impression. If you were to immediately react to this impression, perhaps by sulking, sending an angry text, or giving them the cold shoulder, you would be fueling a conflict based on an assumption. However, if you practice delaying judgment, you withhold that negative interpretation. Instead, you keep an open mind. Perhaps their car broke down, they had an emergency with a family member, or they were unexpectedly delayed at work. Without full information, assuming malice creates an imaginary conflict that can very quickly become real. By delaying judgment, you create space for understanding and potentially prevent an entirely avoidable dispute. It allows you to approach the situation with curiosity rather than condemnation, opening the door for a simple explanation that could entirely dissolve any brewing tension. So, the next time you find yourself quickly drawing conclusions about someone else's behavior or intentions, especially in a situation that could lead to conflict, take a moment to notice that impulse. Can you consciously choose to suspend that judgment? Can you ask yourself if you have all the facts before deciding what someone else's actions mean? By doing so, you not only align yourself with Stoic wisdom, but also cultivate a more peaceful and understanding demeanor, both for yourself and in your interactions with others. It is an active choice to give others the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise, which fosters an environment of trust and reduces unnecessary friction. Your control is in your effort, not the outcome. This powerful realignment of focus is the essence of Command 26, focus on action, not outcome. It's a profound shift that liberates us from the anxiety of external results, anchoring our peace instead in our own virtuous conduct. In the midst of conflict, it's easy to become fixated on winning the argument, reaching a specific resolution, or even just getting the other person to agree with us. But the Stoics remind us that these outcomes, while often desired, lie largely outside our direct control. The other person's thoughts, feelings, and decisions are their own, and no matter how skillfully we argue or how clearly we present our case, we cannot dictate their response. This command reinforces a fundamental Stoic principle. Our true power lies in our intentions and our efforts. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, wisely taught that our job is to do our best, to act with integrity, wisdom, and fairness, and then to graciously accept whatever happens next. This isn't a call to indifference or passivity, quite the opposite. It demands our absolute best effort in the domain where we truly have agency, our own internal state and our actions. When we engage in a conflict, our focus should not be on securing a victory, but on conducting ourselves in a manner consistent with our highest values. Did we speak truthfully? Did we listen respectfully? Did we maintain our composure? These are the metrics of success that truly matter from a Stoic perspective, because they are entirely dependent on us. Consider a negotiation, whether it's for a new job, a shared resource, or even just deciding on a movie to watch with a friend. You come prepared, you present your points clearly, you listen to the other side, and you maintain a calm and respectful demeanor throughout. You've put in the effort to act virtuously. Now, what if the negotiation still falls through? What if you don't get the raise you wanted, or your friend insists on watching a film you dislike? If your sole focus was on the outcome, you would likely feel frustration, disappointment, or even anger. But if your focus was on your actions, on your preparation, your clear communication, your patience, and your respectful engagement, then even a disappointing external result cannot diminish your internal success. You acted well, and that is where your peace resides. The failure of the negotiation doesn't reflect a failure on your part if you upheld your virtues. This mindset encourages a more resilient approach to conflict. It means you can enter difficult conversations without the crushing pressure of needing a specific result. You become less concerned with manipulating others or coercing an outcome and more invested in simply showing up as your best self. This doesn't mean you don't strive for positive results. It simply means your inner tranquility isn't contingent upon them. Instead of agonizing over whether the other person will understand, agree, or change, you can direct your energy toward ensuring that your own words are carefully chosen, your tone is appropriate, and your intentions are pure. Reflect for a moment on a recent conflict you experienced. Perhaps it was a disagreement with a family member, a colleague, or even an exchange with a stranger. When you look back at that situation, what did you focus on most? Was it the desired outcome, perhaps seeking an apology or a concession? Or was it the quality of your own actions? Did you speak with kindness, even when provoked? Did you listen attentively, even when you disagreed? Did you maintain your ethical standards, even if the other person did not? Take a moment to evaluate your actions, not the results, in that recent conflict. By shifting your internal scorecard, you empower yourself to navigate future disagreements with a profound sense of inner freedom, knowing that true success is found not in external victories, but in the unwavering practice of virtue. Your breath is your pause button in conflict, a simple yet profoundly effective tool to navigate the storm of intense emotions that often erupt during disagreements. It's a fundamental truth that transcends cultures and philosophies. When tensions rise, our breath becomes shallow, rapid, and uncontrolled, mirroring the chaos within. By consciously taking control of our breathing, we can immediately begin to reclaim our composure and prevent ourselves from being swept away by impulsive reactions. This isn't just about feeling a little calmer, it's about actively creating a wedge between stimulus and response, a crucial step in all Stoic practice. While the ancient Stoics didn't explicitly detail breathwork techniques in the same way modern mindfulness practices do, the essence of mindful breathing aligns perfectly with their overarching emphasis on self-control, rational action, and maintaining inner tranquility amidst external turbulence. Their pursuit of apatheia, not as apathy but as freedom from disturbing passions, inherently calls for tools that can quiet the mind and regulate emotional states. The breath, an involuntary action we can consciously influence, becomes a direct pathway to influencing our autonomic nervous system and thereby our emotional landscape. It's a physiological anchor to the present moment, pulling us away from ruminations about the past or anxieties about the future, both of which often fuel conflict. Picture yourself in a heated discussion. Someone has just said something that makes your blood boil, and you feel that familiar surge of anger, a tightening in your chest, a rapid pulse. Your immediate instinct might be to retort sharply, to defend yourself, or to attack back. This is precisely the moment when your breath can become your greatest ally. Instead of immediately launching into a reactive response, try this. Silently, take 3 deep, slow breaths. Inhale deeply through your nose, feeling your abdomen rise. Hold for a moment, then exhale slowly through your mouth, letting go of the tension. Just 3 breaths. This isn't about ignoring the problem or suppressing your feelings, but about creating enough mental space to choose your next action rather than being propelled by primal emotion. This brief pause, facilitated by conscious breathing, allows your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought and decision-making, to catch up with your amygdala, the emotional center. It interrupts the automatic fight or flight response, giving you precious seconds to access your Stoic training, to remember the dichotomy of control, to seek understanding, to choose objective language. It's a micro moment of self-governance that can prevent a regrettable outburst to escalate rising tension and allow for a more reasoned, effective response. It offers an instantaneous return to your inner citadel, a sanctuary of calm from which you can survey the conflict with greater clarity. The beauty of mindful breathing is its accessibility. You don't need special equipment or a quiet room. You can practice it anywhere, anytime conflict arises, or even predictively, before entering a potentially tense situation. Make it a habit to check in with your breath when you feel stress building, not just during overt conflict but in everyday frustrations. This consistent practice strengthens your capacity to remain calm and centered when it truly matters. We often underestimate the profound power of such a simple, biological function. It's always with us, ready to be deployed as our most reliable tool for self-regulation. So for your next stressful interaction, commit to trying breath awareness. Just a few conscious breaths can transform your response, turning a potential emotional landslide into a carefully considered step. This too shall pass, including this argument. This simple phrase, often whispered to ourselves in moments of stress, encapsulates a profound Stoic truth: the impermanence of all things, especially our conflicts. In the heat of an argument, it's easy to feel as though this particular disagreement is the most important, the most overwhelming, and perhaps even unending. We get caught in the present drama, losing sight of the larger timeline of our lives and the fleeting nature of every single human interaction. But Stoicism, with its wise counsel on the transient nature of existence, offers us a powerful antidote to this emotional magnification. The Stoics understood that clinging to the present moment of conflict, allowing it to consume our thoughts and emotions, only amplifies our suffering. They urged us to step back and recognize that everything in the external world, including the sharp words and strained silences of a dispute, is constantly changing. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, often reflected on the vastness of time and the endless succession of events, reminding himself that what seems monumental today will inevitably fade into insignificance tomorrow. He wrote about the fleetingness of human affairs, noting that even empires rise and fall, and individual lives, with all their trials and triumphs, are but a blink in the eye of eternity. This perspective isn't meant to diminish the validity of our feelings or the importance of resolving issues, but rather to strip the conflict of its exaggerated emotional weight, preventing it from consuming our inner peace. Consider for a moment a conflict from your own past that, at the time, felt like a monumental obstacle, perhaps even devastating. Maybe it was a fierce disagreement with a friend, a challenging work dispute, or a misunderstanding with a loved one. You might have spent days or weeks replaying conversations in your head, feeling the sting of the words or worrying about the outcome. Yet, as time passed, did it not eventually resolve, or at least fade into the background? Many of those once overwhelming clashes now likely seem trivial, perhaps even forgotten, their initial intensity dulled by the passage of time. The emotional residue dissipated, the urgent need to be right diminished, and life, as it always does, moved on. This recollection offers a powerful practical example of impermanence at work. It demonstrates that the current storm, no matter how fierce, will also eventually subside. This realization is not an invitation to apathy or to dismiss genuine concerns. Instead, it's a strategic mental tool that allows us to engage with conflicts more calmly and effectively. When you remind yourself that this argument, like all things, is temporary, you create emotional distance. This distance helps you avoid making impulsive decisions or saying things you'll later regret. It encourages you to seek resolution not out of desperation, but out of a clear-headed understanding of what truly matters for your long-term tranquility and relationships. The energy you save by not catastrophizing and not dwelling on the conflict can then be redirected towards constructive solutions. So, take a moment now to reflect on a resolved conflict from your past, one that felt overwhelming at the time. How does it look to you now from the vantage point of today, recognizing how those intense feelings past can provide profound relief and perspective during your next challenge? Want only what is right and possible. This simple yet profound statement cuts to the heart of what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, a powerful internal command designed to dramatically reduce the friction we experience in life, especially in our conflicts. When we align our wants, our longings, and our aspirations with what is truly virtuous and crucially within our sphere of control, we effectively disarm many potential sources of frustration and disagreement. Think about it. How many times has a conflict escalated because someone, perhaps even you, was stubbornly clinging to an outcome that was never truly guaranteed, or demanding something that was fundamentally outside their power to achieve? The Stoics taught that much of our suffering stems not from external events themselves, but from our irrational desires concerning those events. This principle is about recognizing the fundamental difference between what we can influence and what we cannot. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic teachers, emphasized this distinction with unwavering clarity. He taught that peace of mind comes from curbing our desires, from releasing our grip on externals, and from focusing our will solely on what is up to us, our judgments, our impulses, our opinions. When we desire things that are not wholly in our control, like another person's agreement, their compliance, or even their affection, we set ourselves up for disappointment and, inevitably, conflict. Imagine going into a debate absolutely determined to not only present your viewpoint but also to force your opponent to agree with you. This desire for agreement, an external factor, is a recipe for frustration and escalation. The other person has their own mind and their own conclusions, and their agreement is simply not within your control, no matter how logically sound your arguments might be. Instead, the discipline of desire encourages a subtle but revolutionary shift. What if, in that debate, your primary desire wasn't for the other person's agreement, but rather for understanding? What if you genuinely wanted to articulate your perspective clearly and to fully grasp theirs, even if you never reach a consensus? This desire for understanding, for virtue in communication, is entirely within your control. You can choose to speak clearly, to listen attentively, to ask clarifying questions. You can choose to remain calm and rational, regardless of how the other person responds. By shifting your desire from an external outcome agreement to an internal, virtuous action, understanding, and respectful communication, you effectively remove a major trigger for conflict. Even if the debate remains unresolved, you can walk away knowing you acted virtuously and honorably, and that is a victory in itself. This applies to countless scenarios beyond formal debates. Consider a disagreement with a family member over holiday plans. If your stubborn desire is for everyone to conform to your ideal schedule, you're likely to encounter resistance and tension. However, if your desire is simply to contribute constructively to the discussion, to voice your preferences respectfully, and to find a solution that prioritizes family harmony, a virtuous internal goal, the experience becomes entirely different. You're no longer fighting against reality or another person's will, but rather working with what is possible. It's about wanting what reason dictates, what virtue demands, and what is truly within the sphere of your personal agency. Take a moment to examine one desire that often leads to conflict in your life. Is it a desire for control over others, for validation, for a specific outcome that isn't guaranteed? How might shifting that desire towards something internal and virtuous change the dynamic of your next disagreement? To respond wisely, first listen completely. This simple phrase holds a profound truth, especially in the heat of conflict. When we engage in disagreements, our natural inclination is often to formulate our rebuttal, to gather our arguments, and to wait for our turn to speak, rather than truly absorbing what the other person is saying. This isn't listening, it's waiting to talk. The Stoics understood that true communication, and by extension, the peaceful resolution of conflict, hinges on a deeper form of engagement. By intentionally giving our full attention to understand, rather than merely preparing to reply, we unlock a powerful tool for de-escalation and clarity. Deep listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about discerning intentions, uncovering underlying concerns, and acknowledging the other person's perspective, even if we ultimately disagree with it. This practice inherently reduces misunderstandings, which are often the kindling for many conflicts. When someone feels truly heard, a significant portion of their defensive posture often dissolves, opening the door for more productive dialogue. Seneca, a prominent Stoic philosopher, frequently incorporated the value of hearing others out into his writings, emphasizing that wisdom often comes from observation and quiet contemplation rather than constant pronouncements. He knew that to truly grasp a situation, one must first be willing to receive information without immediate judgment or interruption. This Stoic insight isn't about passive reception, it's an active process of mental openness and focused attention. It means temporarily setting aside our own preconceived notions, our own emotional biases, and our own agenda to create space for the other person's reality. Imagine the difference in a heated discussion if, instead of interrupting or talking over someone, you simply let them speak their piece fully, perhaps even inviting them to elaborate. This act alone can transform the energy of the conversation. Consider a practical example during a tense disagreement with a colleague about a project deadline. Instead of immediately defending your progress or attacking their assumptions, you might try a technique called paraphrasing. After they voice their concerns, you could say something like, "So, if I understand correctly, you're worried that my current timeline won't meet the project's critical launch date, and that could lead to negative repercussions for the whole team. Is that right?" This isn't an admission of guilt or agreement with their concern, but rather a demonstration that you have truly heard and understood their perspective. This simple act of verbalizing their viewpoint back to them, without adding your own spin or defense, often has a remarkable de-escalating effect. It shows respect, validates their feelings, and confirms that you're engaging with their actual point, not just a strawman version of it. It builds a bridge of understanding, even across a chasm of disagreement. This practice extends beyond formal conflict resolution into our everyday interactions. It strengthens relationships, fosters trust, and cultivates an environment where misunderstandings are less likely to take root. By making a conscious effort to listen deeply, we not only improve our conflict responses, but we also become more empathetic and effective communicators in all aspects of our lives. So for today, I encourage you to set a small challenge for yourself. In just one conversation, whether with a coworker, a friend, or a family member, commit to practicing full listening. Don't interrupt, don't formulate your response, just truly listen to understand. Notice the difference it makes, not just in the conversation itself, but in your own internal calm and clarity. Don't make a storm out of a drizzle. This vivid image perfectly captures the essence of our 31st command, the crucial need to avoid catastrophizing in conflicts. How often do we find ourselves in a disagreement, and our minds immediately leap to the absolute worst-case scenario. A minor disagreement with a loved one suddenly means the end of the relationship. A slight critique from a colleague signals the termination of our career. This mental habit of inflating potential negative outcomes, transforming small issues into insurmountable crises, is a common pitfall that dramatically escalates our internal and often external suffering. It's an imaginative leap that takes a minor spark and turns it into a raging inferno, primarily within the confines of our own minds. The Stoics, with their profound understanding of human psychology, recognized this tendency for irrational fear and exaggeration. They taught that much of our distress comes not from events themselves, but from our judgments and interpretations of those events. Seneca, in particular, famously articulated this insight, observing that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. This isn't just a poetic turn of phrase, it's a deep psychological truth. Our minds possess an incredible capacity for creativity, but when directed towards imagining dire consequences and worst-case scenarios, that creativity becomes a source of immense anxiety and unnecessary conflict. When we catastrophize, we blur the lines between what is happening and what might happen, allowing our fears to dictate our present experience. This process not only amplifies our stress, but also blinds us to potential solutions and rational responses. We become so consumed by the imagined catastrophe that we lose the ability to think clearly or act effectively. To illustrate this, consider a common scenario. You have a disagreement with your partner about household chores. If you catastrophize, you might immediately think, "This argument about chores means they don't respect me, they don't value my contributions, and this relationship is clearly doomed to fail." This extreme leap from a specific, solvable issue to a fundamental flaw in the relationship amplifies stress exponentially. It turns a conversation about task distribution into an existential crisis for your partnership. In reality, the disagreement is likely just about chores and perhaps some underlying fatigue or miscommunication, but your mind, by assuming the worst, has manufactured a far greater threat than actually exists. This internal narrative then feeds into the conflict, making you defensive, agitated, and less likely to engage constructively. The initial drizzle of a minor disagreement morphs into a mental storm, not because of the reality of the situation, but because of the stories we tell ourselves about it. Recognizing when we are catastrophizing is the first vital step towards challenging this detrimental habit. It requires a moment of self-awareness, a pause, to catch our minds as they race towards the most dramatic conclusion. So, for your reflection, take a moment to consider a recent conflict or even a potential one. Did you notice yourself jumping to conclusions about the worst possible outcome? Did you find yourself assuming that a specific disagreement would ruin a relationship, lead to job loss, or cause irreversible damage? Now, challenge that assumption. What is the most likely, realistic outcome? What is the actual, immediate problem you're facing, stripped of all the imagined future suffering? By actively questioning and reframing these catastrophic thoughts, we begin to dismantle their power, allowing us to approach conflicts with a calmer, clearer, and far more effective mindset. Let neither flattery nor insult shake you. This powerful command cuts to the heart of Stoic practice, guiding us to cultivate an unshakable inner stability, regardless of the opinions or judgments of others. It's about building an inner fortress, a sense of self-worth and peace that remains undisturbed by the shifting winds of external praise or criticism. In the midst of conflict, it's all too easy to become entangled in what others think of us, to crave their approval, or to be devastated by their disapproval. But for the Stoics, true freedom comes from detaching our inner state from these external fluctuations. The Stoic goal is not to be emotionless, but to achieve a state of inner tranquility, or apatheia, meaning a freedom from disturbing passions. This doesn't mean becoming numb, but rather developing a rational control over our responses. When it comes to praise and blame, this equanimity is vital. If our happiness hinges on receiving compliments, we become slaves to the whims of others. Similarly, if every criticism sends us into a spiral of self-doubt or anger, we grant immense power to those who wish us ill, or even those who simply hold a different perspective. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic teachers, strongly emphasized this point, reminding us that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by our opinions about them. He insisted that others' views, whether positive or negative, are externals, and therefore outside our control. Our inner peace should never be contingent on something so volatile and uncontrollable as another person's thoughts or words. True resilience lies in strengthening our internal compass, aligning our actions with virtue, and letting that be our sole measure of success. Consider a scenario where you receive unfair criticism at work, perhaps from a colleague who misunderstands your intentions or is operating from a place of insecurity. Your initial reaction might be a surge of anger, defensiveness, or hurt. You might feel the urge to lash out, to justify yourself vehemently, or to withdraw and stew in resentment. However, practicing equanimity means observing these initial emotional responses without immediately acting on them. It involves taking a mental step back and reminding yourself that this criticism, whether valid or not, is an external event. It is information, not a direct assault on your intrinsic value. You can calmly assess the feedback for any kernel of truth, learn from it if appropriate, and then disregard the rest without letting it derail your emotional state. This isn't about ignoring valid feedback. It's about preventing unfair or unfounded criticism from penetrating your inner peace. It's about letting the words wash over you without clinging to them, much like water flowing over a smooth stone. Your job is to act with integrity and competence, and the opinions of others, while sometimes informative, do not define your character or worth. This principle extends equally to praise. While receiving commendation feels pleasant, building our self-esteem solely on external validation makes us equally vulnerable. If we are puffed up by praise, we are just as easily deflated by its absence or by subsequent blame. The Stoic ideal is a kind of inner gyroscope, keeping us steady and centered regardless of whether we are applauded or condemned. It's about understanding that our virtue and efforts are their own reward, and external acknowledgements are simply bonuses, not necessities. So, take a moment to reflect on your own sensitivity to praise or blame. Do you find yourself striving for compliments or shrinking from potential disapproval? How much does the opinion of others dictate your mood or actions during a conflict? By consciously decoupling your self-worth from these external judgments, you create a powerful buffer against the turbulence of disagreements, allowing you to engage in conflicts with a stable, rational mind. What if you chose courage over fear in this conflict? This isn't just a rhetorical question. It's an invitation to a powerful Stoic technique known as the what-if exercise, but with a crucial positive twist. Instead of letting your mind spiral into anxious predictions about the worst possible outcomes, or dreading what might go wrong, this command encourages you to pivot that imaginative energy toward envisioning your highest self. It's about consciously stepping into the role of the person you aspire to be, the courageous, virtuous, and wise individual who navigates challenges with grace and effectiveness. This technique directly counters the natural human tendency to catastrophize, a habit that often paralyzes us or drives us to respond to conflict from a place of desperation rather than strength. For the Stoics, every moment, especially those fraught with tension or disagreement, presents an opportunity to practice virtue. Conflict isn't just an external event, it's an internal proving ground for your character. When you ask yourself, what would the best version of myself do right now? You are actively engaging in what Marcus Aurelius referred to as rising to challenges with character. He believed that our true nature is revealed and strengthened through adversity. This isn't about ignoring the difficulties of the situation or pretending that fear doesn't exist. It's about acknowledging those feelings and then consciously choosing to act in alignment with your deepest values. It's a deliberate shift from a reactive, emotion-driven stance to a proactive, reason-guided one. By framing conflict in this way, you transform a potentially draining experience into a fertile ground for personal growth, where each disagreement becomes a chance to further sculpt your inner nature. To put this into practice, consider a common scenario. You're faced with a sudden, intense disagreement, perhaps with a family member or a close friend. Your immediate inclination might be to shut down, to become defensive, or to launch into an emotional counter-argument. These are natural fight or flight responses. However, before you speak or act, pause and ask yourself, what would a wise person do in this exact situation? This simple question acts as a circuit breaker for impulsive reactions. It forces you to momentarily detach from your immediate emotional state and access a calmer, more rational part of your mind. A wise person might choose to listen more intently, to speak with measured words, to seek understanding rather than victory, or to simply walk away if the situation is too heated to be productive. The answer might vary depending on the specifics of the conflict, but the process of asking the question itself shifts your internal state from one of anxiety to one of intentionality. This isn't about being perfect, it's about continually striving for improvement. The Stoics understood that we are all works in progress, so when facing your next dispute, make a conscious effort to use this powerful internal prompt. Before you engage, before you react, take a breath and ask, what would the most courageous, the most patient, the most just version of myself do here? Encourage yourself to live up to that ideal, even in a small way. This single question can become a cornerstone for transforming how you navigate conflict, turning moments of friction into opportunities for profound self-mastery and peace. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. This ancient proverb, while not explicitly Stoic, perfectly encapsulates the profound wisdom of Command 34, practicing forgiveness as a duty, not just for others, but primarily for your own peace and well-being. The Stoics understood deeply that harboring resentment, anger, or bitterness does far more harm to the one holding onto these emotions than to the perceived wrongdoer. It's a self-inflicted wound that festers, consuming mental energy, emotional peace, and even physical health. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is not about condoning harmful actions or forgetting injustices. It's about liberating yourself from the corrosive effects of unreleased negative emotions. It's a strategic choice, a deliberate act of self-preservation that reclaims your inner tranquility from the grip of past grievances. Seneca, one of the most eloquent Stoic philosophers, spoke extensively on the folly of prolonging anger and resentment, highlighting how it traps us in a cycle of suffering. He recognized that while the initial offense might be external and beyond our control, our decision to cling to the pain and keep the wound open is entirely within our power to change. Forgiveness, then, becomes an internal act of letting go, a recognition that justice, if achievable, is a separate endeavor from your personal emotional state. It's an acknowledgement that you cannot control the past or another person's actions, but you absolutely can control your response to them and whether you allow them to continue to dictate your emotional present. By choosing to forgive, you are essentially declaring your independence from the pain that someone else inflicted, asserting your sovereignty over your own mind and emotions. This doesn't mean you have to reconcile with the person or forget what happened, but rather that you release the emotional burden that ties you to the event. Consider a simple, everyday example. Someone cut you off in traffic, leading to a flash of anger and frustration. You might replay the scenario in your mind, stewing in indignation for the next 10 or 20 minutes, or even longer. That prolonged anger, that self-imposed replay of the injustice, causes you far more stress and internal turmoil than the initial action itself. Forgiving that minor offense, which in this context simply means letting go of the anger and moving on, frees up that mental energy. It allows you to return to a state of calm, to focus on the road, and to enjoy your day without carrying the weight of someone else's inconsiderate act. This small emotional release prevents that minor incident from escalating into prolonged self-inflicted suffering. The same principle applies to more significant conflicts. By releasing the emotional grip of past hurts, you prevent them from coloring your present interactions, influencing your mood, and diverting your focus from what truly matters. Forgiveness also aligns with the Stoic understanding of human nature, that people often err out of ignorance or weakness rather than pure malice. While their actions may still cause pain, understanding this perspective can make it easier to detach from personal offense and extend a form of rational compassion. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it reframes it in a way that allows you to release the overwhelming emotional charge. It allows you to say, "This happened, it caused pain, but I choose not to carry that pain forward." So, take a moment to identify one grudge you might be holding onto, perhaps a small slight or a long-standing resentment, and consider the immense freedom you could gain by releasing it. What mental space would it free up? What emotional weight would be lifted? The act of forgiveness is ultimately a gift you give to yourself, a powerful step toward reclaiming your peace. The best response is often the simplest one. This brings us to Command 35, using minimal effective response, applying the Stoic principle of doing only what is necessary to address a conflict without overcomplicating or escalating it. In the heat of disagreement, our natural inclination can be to over-explain, to justify every point, or to retaliate with equal or greater force. However, the Stoic path encourages a different approach, one of economy of action and words. It's about discerning the essential kernel of the issue and offering a response that addresses precisely that, and nothing more. This isn't about being dismissive or uncaring. It's about being strategically efficient, preserving your emotional energy, and directing the conversation toward resolution rather than prolonged engagement in unproductive back and forths. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, often emphasized the importance of avoiding unnecessary activity, a maxim that extends profoundly to our interactions during conflict. He believed that much of our suffering stems from our own judgments and our tendency to expend energy on things that are not truly essential or within our control. In the context of conflict, this means recognizing when a drawn-out argument serves no real purpose beyond satisfying an ego or revalidating a point that has already been made. A minimal effective response cuts through this noise. It gets straight to the core of what needs to be communicated or what action needs to be taken, without adding layers of emotion, historical grievances, or speculative accusations. This simple, direct approach often disarms the situation, as it leaves little room for further contention or misinterpretation. Consider a practical example. A colleague might send an email with a veiled criticism or a slightly rude tone. Your initial impulse might be to draft a lengthy, detailed reply defending yourself, pointing out their tone, or even subtly criticizing them back. This is where the minimal effective response comes in. Instead of escalating, you might choose to respond with a brief acknowledgement of their point and a request for clarification if needed, or simply address the factual content of their email without engaging with the underlying tone. Perhaps a simple, understood, "Can you clarify point 3?" Such a response avoids pouring fuel on the fire. It demonstrates professionalism, maintains your composure, and prevents a minor incident from spiraling into an interpersonal drama. It shows that you are focused on the task at hand and not on engaging in emotional warfare. Often, a brief acknowledgement of someone's frustration without accepting blame or justifying yourself can resolve a misunderstanding swiftly. For instance, if someone expresses annoyance that a task isn't done, a calm, "I hear your frustration, I'm working on it now," is far more effective than a defensive explanation or a counter-accusation. This approach not only de-escalates the immediate conflict, but also sets a precedent for how future disagreements will be handled. By refusing to engage in protracted, emotional exchanges, you communicate that your time and energy are valuable and that you prefer efficient, respectful communication. It teaches others that if they wish to resolve issues with you, they too must operate with clarity and directness, rather than relying on emotional manipulation or passive aggression. The art of the minimal effective response is a powerful tool for maintaining your inner peace and fostering healthier interactions. It reminds you that you don't need to justify yourself endlessly or win every verbal battle. You just need to say or do what is necessary and nothing more. Take a moment to reflect on a current conflict you might be facing. Can you identify the simplest, most direct response or action that would move the situation towards resolution without adding unnecessary complexity? Everyone has a share of reason, find it. This powerful idea leads us to command 36, reflect on the virtue of the other. In the heat of conflict, it is all too easy to demonize the person with whom you're disagreeing. We often reduce them to their most irritating traits, their current flawed argument, or even their past mistakes. But the Stoics, with their profound understanding of human nature, encouraged us to look deeper. They believed in the inherent rationality of all humans, even those who act irrationally. This command asks us to pause our immediate judgment and actively search for the goodness, the underlying reason, or the positive intention that might be hidden beneath layers of frustration, anger, or misunderstanding. It's an exercise in profound empathy and charitable interpretation. The Stoic belief in human rationality isn't naive optimism, but a practical tool for navigating complex social interactions. They understood that people rarely act out of pure malice, but more often from a place of ignorance, fear, or misguided attempts to do what they believe is right. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, frequently urged himself and his readers to seek out the good in others, even those who seem to inflict harm. He recognized that by focusing on someone's virtue, however small or obscured, we can maintain our own tranquility and prevent ourselves from becoming embittered. This isn't about condoning harmful behavior, but about understanding its source, which often lies in a distorted perception rather than inherent evil. When you assume the best, even when evidence suggests the worst, you open a pathway for constructive dialogue rather than closing it off with condemnation. It allows you to address the behavior without attacking the person, which is a crucial distinction in conflict resolution. To put this into practice, consider a situation where someone delivers harsh or critical words toward you. Your initial reaction might be to feel hurt, angry, or defensive, but instead of immediately retaliating or withdrawing, try to identify one positive intention behind their words. Perhaps their criticism, though poorly delivered, stems from a desire for efficiency, a commitment to quality, or even a misguided attempt to help you improve. For instance, if a colleague aggressively points out a flaw in your project, instead of labeling them as mean or controlling, you might reflect that their underlying intention is a concern for the project's success. Or perhaps they feel pressure from their own superiors and are simply channeling that stress. By seeking out this hidden virtue or understandable motive, you transform the interaction from a personal attack into a problem to be solved collaboratively. It allows you to separate the message from the harsh delivery, giving you the clarity to respond constructively. This exercise isn't always easy, especially when emotions are running high. It requires a conscious effort to override our automatic defensive mechanisms, but by consistently practicing this command, you train your mind to look for connection rather than division. It cultivates a broader sense of humanity and compassion, which are cornerstones of Stoic philosophy. When you recognize the shared spark of reason or the common human struggles in another, even in moments of antagonism, you elevate the conflict from a personal battle to a shared challenge. This shift in perspective can disarm hostility and open doors to solutions that were previously unimaginable. I encourage you to think about someone with whom you currently disagree. Can you find just one virtue, one positive intention, or one understandable reason behind their actions or words, even if it's deeply buried? Each morning, arm yourself with calm. This simple yet profound practice brings us to command 37. Practice daily preparation for conflict. Just as an athlete warms up before a race, or a musician rehearses before a performance, the Stoics understood the immense value of mental preparation for the challenges life invariably presents. Conflict in its many forms is an inevitable part of the human experience. Instead of hoping it won't happen, the Stoic approach is to expect it, and more importantly, to prepare your mind to meet it with virtue and composure. This isn't about fostering a pessimistic outlook. Rather, it's about acknowledging reality so that you are never caught off guard and can respond from a place of strength, not surprise. This daily mental conditioning links directly to the Stoic practice of morning meditation, a ritual where thinkers like Marcus Aurelius would mentally review the day ahead. He would anticipate potential difficulties, including interactions with difficult people or frustrating situations, and then consciously decide how he would respond virtuously. This foresight allows you to pre-program your reactions, moving away from impulsive emotional outbursts and towards considered, rational responses. If you've already decided how you'll handle rudeness, for example, when it actually occurs, you're less likely to be thrown off balance. You've essentially run a mental simulation, training your mind to prioritize peace and reason over anger and resentment. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote in his Meditations, "Begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet with the meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and unsocial. They are all like this because they do not know what is good and evil." This wasn't a cynical lament, but a practical reminder to himself that these behaviors are part of the human condition, and that his task was to maintain his own integrity and inner peace regardless. He didn't expect others to be perfect, nor did he expect life to be free of friction. Instead, he prepared his mind to accept these realities and to respond from a place of understanding and virtue. This daily exercise allowed him to fortify his inner citadel, making him less vulnerable to the external chaos and emotional turbulence that others might bring. To integrate this into your own routine, consider dedicating just 1 minute each morning to conflict preparedness. As you begin your day, take a few deep breaths and then visualize potential conflicts you might encounter. Perhaps a challenging conversation at work, a disagreement with a family member, or even a minor annoyance like traffic or a long queue. Instead of dwelling on the negative feelings these scenarios evoke, visualize your ideal response. See yourself remaining calm, speaking thoughtfully, practicing empathy, and adhering to your values. Imagine yourself employing the Stoic commands we've discussed so far, such as taking a pause, differentiating what is within your control, or seeking understanding. For instance, if you anticipate a heated discussion, visualize yourself listening intently before responding, remaining objective, and focusing on the facts rather than emotional accusations. By mentally rehearsing these virtuous responses, you build a mental muscle memory, making it easier to execute them when a real conflict arises. This isn't about controlling the outcome, but about controlling your own actions and maintaining your inner tranquility, irrespective of how others behave. This small daily practice can be a powerful shield against the emotional onslaught of everyday conflicts. This is hard, and yet I can learn from it. This powerful mental shift brings us to command 38, use the and yet reframe. In the thick of conflict, it's incredibly easy to get trapped in a whirlpool of negativity, focusing solely on the difficulty, the injustice, or the pain. Our minds naturally gravitate towards what's wrong, what feels unfair, or what we're losing. But Stoicism offers us a lifeline, a way to acknowledge the challenging reality while simultaneously searching for a constructive perspective. It's about refusing to let the negative aspects of a situation be the only story you tell yourself. The Stoics were masters of reframing. They didn't deny hardship. Instead, they integrated it into their philosophy as an essential component for growth. For them, every obstacle wasn't just something to be endured, but something to be utilized. This approach isn't about sugarcoating difficult situations or pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. It's about consciously choosing to look for the silver lining, the lesson, or the opportunity for virtue, even when everything feels stacked against you. It's recognizing that while the initial impression might be one of pain or frustration, there's often an and yet lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic thinkers, consistently taught that it's not what happens to us that matters, but how we respond to it. He saw obstacles not as roadblocks, but as raw material for building character. He might say, you are insulted, and yet you can practice patience. Or, you face a difficult situation, and yet it is an opportunity to demonstrate your resilience. This, and yet, reframe transforms a seemingly negative event into a training ground for the virtues that Stoicism champions: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. It redirects your focus from the external event, which is often beyond your control, to your internal response, which is always within your power. Consider a common scenario: receiving harsh criticism. Your initial automatic reaction might be hurt, anger, or defensiveness. You might think, that comment was so unfair and unwarranted, it really stung. This is the initial difficulty, the "this is hard" part. But then you can apply the and yet reframe. You might say, it hurts to hear that, and yet perhaps there's a kernel of truth in what they're saying that I can learn from. Or, it felt unfair, and yet it's an opportunity for me to practice remaining calm under fire, regardless of how others perceive me. This doesn't mean you automatically agree with the criticism. It simply means you open yourself to the possibility of growth. You're acknowledging the emotion, the sting, but then you're actively seeking a constructive path forward. Another example might be a significant disagreement with a loved one. The immediate feeling could be one of frustration, sadness, or a sense of injustice. You might think, this argument is causing so much stress, and it feels like we're just going in circles. But with a and yet reframe, you can shift your perspective. This argument is deeply unpleasant, and yet it's an opportunity to practice active listening, to understand their perspective more deeply, or to strengthen my own ability to communicate calmly under pressure. Or even, this situation is painful, and yet it reminds me of the importance of clear communication and setting boundaries. by finding that, and yet, you move from being a passive victim of the conflict to an active participant in your own growth and development. This practice forces you to look beyond the immediate emotional impact and search for the hidden wisdom or strength that can be cultivated. It encourages a proactive mindset where challenges are not just endured, but actively transformed into stepping stones. It's a way to reclaim your agency in difficult situations, reminding you that even when events are outside your control, your interpretation and your response always belong to you. So the next time you find yourself caught in a struggle, ask yourself, this feels incredibly difficult, and yet what positive or constructive perspective can I add to this situation? What lesson can be drawn, what virtue can be practiced, adding that, and yet can be the key to unlocking growth where you might have only seen pain. Do your part and let go of the rest. This simple yet profound statement encapsulates Command 39, practice detachment from outcomes. It's a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, particularly crucial when navigating conflicts. We often find ourselves entangled in disputes not just because of the initial disagreement, but because we become deeply invested in a specific outcome. We want to be understood, accepted, or to have our solution adopted. While these desires are natural, they can also become sources of immense frustration and suffering, especially when that desired outcome is not entirely within our control. The Stoics understood this profoundly and taught us to shift our focus from the external results to our internal actions and intentions. This command isn't about apathy or simply giving up. On the contrary, it encourages us to care deeply about acting rightly with integrity, wisdom, and courage. It means putting forth our best effort, communicating clearly, advocating fairly, and upholding our values throughout the conflict. Our responsibility lies in the quality of our input, not in the reception of it. The Stoics would argue that our true success is found in faithfully executing our duties and embodying virtue, irrespective of whether others acknowledge our efforts or agree with our stance. This frees us from the emotional roller coaster that comes with attachment to external validation or victory. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential Stoic teachers, articulated this principle with remarkable clarity. He frequently reminded his students that our actions, our attitudes, and our judgments are entirely within our control, whereas the reactions, opinions, and behaviors of others are not. He would say something to the effect of, "If you want to be free, desire nothing that is not in your power." In the context of conflict, this means we can control how we prepare, how we speak, how we listen, and how we behave. We cannot, however, control whether the other person will understand us, change their mind, apologize, or comply with our wishes. When we internalize this distinction, much of the anxiety and anger associated with conflict begins to dissipate. Consider a scenario where you are in a meeting, presenting a well-researched proposal that you believe is genuinely beneficial for your team. You've prepared diligently, articulated your points clearly, and responded to questions thoughtfully. Your part is to present with clarity, humility, and conviction. Now, if you are deeply attached to the outcome, that your proposal must be accepted exactly as you presented it, you open yourself to disappointment and anger if it's challenged or rejected. However, if you practice detachment, you perform your part excellently, and then you let go. You may think, "I have stated my view clearly, supported it with facts, and listened respectfully to feedback. My work here is done, regardless of whether they accept it or suggest changes." You've acted virtuously, and that is where your control ends and your peace begins. The quality of your actions is your triumph, not the acceptance of your ideas. In a personal relationship, practicing this command might look like expressing your feelings honestly and calmly to a loved one about a recurring issue. You articulate your boundaries, explain your needs, and offer potential solutions. This is your part, done with care and respect. If you remain deeply attached to them, immediately understanding, agreeing, or changing their behavior overnight, you set yourself up for frustration. The Stoic approach would be to state your view clearly and kindly, and then accept that their response is their own. You might reflect, I have expressed myself with integrity and attempted to foster understanding. I cannot control their reaction, but I can control how I continue to respond to the situation and maintain my own peace. This attitude allows you to uphold your values and maintain self-respect without becoming emotionally dependent on the other person's compliance. This detachment from outcomes is profoundly liberating. It enables you to engage in conflicts with courage and integrity, knowing that your inner tranquility is not contingent on winning, being right, or having your way. It allows you to contribute constructively without the desperate need for external validation. It shifts your focus from the often unpredictable and uncontrollable external world to the stable and controllable realm of your character and actions. This practice builds immense emotional resilience, making you less susceptible to the emotional turbulence that often accompanies disagreements. So, take a moment to identify areas in your life where you might be overly attached to certain outcomes in conflicts, and ask yourself how letting go of that attachment could free you. How you end a conflict matters as much as how you start. We've spent so much time exploring how Stoicism can transform our initial responses, but the way we disengage from a disagreement, whether it's resolved or not, carries an equally profound weight. This isn't just about walking away. It's about walking away with dignity, preserving your integrity, and whenever possible, fostering goodwill, even if the immediate issue remains unsettled. This is Command 40, ending with a clear, virtuous closure. The Stoics, with their profound understanding of human nature and social harmony, placed high value on maintaining one's character and contributing to the common good. To them, a conflict wasn't merely a battle to be won or lost, but an opportunity to practice virtue. This extends to the very end of the interaction. If you've acted with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance throughout the dispute, allowing it to conclude with bitterness, resentment, or a dramatic exit would undermine all the internal work you've done. It would be like running a masterful race only to trip at the finish line and refuse to shake the other runner's hands. Seneca, ever the pragmatic guide, often spoke about the importance of managing our emotions, especially anger, because of its destructive capacity, not just during an argument but in its aftermath. He urged us to avoid perpetuating ill feelings, recognizing that holding onto bitterness harms ourselves more than anyone else. To him, ending interactions, even contentious ones, without rancor was a testament to one's self-mastery. It signifies that you are not merely reacting to circumstances, but are deliberately choosing your internal state and your outward demeanor. By doing so, you protect your inner peace and avoid carrying the emotional baggage of unresolved hostility into your next interaction or your quiet moments of reflection. Consider a professional disagreement that has reached an impasse. You've presented your case, listened to counter-arguments, and perhaps even compromised where appropriate, but a resolution just isn't happening in this moment. Instead of slamming down a phone or stalking out of a room, a virtuous closure might involve simply stating, "It seems we've reached a point where we can't agree on this specific aspect right now. I appreciate you sharing your perspective, and I hope we can revisit this or similar issues with fresh eyes another time." Or, "I respect your position even if I don't fully concur. Let's agree to respectfully disagree for now and move forward on other matters." This doesn't mean you've given up on the issue, but rather that you've chosen to end the current engagement with composure and respect, leaving the door open for future collaboration, or at least preventing further damage to the relationship. In a personal setting, say with a family member or friend, a heated discussion might end not with a definitive solution, but with a simple, "I need some time to think about what we've discussed. I value our relationship and I want to make sure we address this properly when we're both calmer," followed by a sincere, "I love you" or "I care about you." This respectful farewell acknowledges the disagreement without letting it define the entire relationship. It's an act of compassion both for the other person and for yourself. It demonstrates that you prioritize the underlying connection above the immediate conflict. This command invites us to be intentional about our exit from disputes. It's about consciously choosing to not let the conflict drag on endlessly in our minds or in our interactions. It's about understanding that while you may not always get the outcome you desire, you can always control how you behave and how you conclude your part in the interaction. Take a moment to reflect on recent conflicts in your life. How did they end? Did you leave feeling drained and resentful? Or did you manage to conclude with a sense of self-respect and perhaps even a lingering thread of goodwill? How might planning a graceful exit strategy change the residue of disputes in your life? As we bring our journey through these 40 inner commands to a close, it's clear that Stoicism offers far more than just philosophical musings. It provides a comprehensive, practical toolkit for transforming how we respond to conflict, not just externally, but from the very core of our being. We've explored commands that teach us the invaluable power of the pause before reaction, giving us that crucial mental space to choose our response rather than being swept away by impulse. We've delved into the profound wisdom of gaining perspective, learning to see our disagreements within the grander tapestry of existence, thereby diminishing their power over us. We've emphasized the fundamental Stoic truth of focusing solely on what's within our control, our thoughts, our judgments, our intentions, and gracefully letting go of the rest. These commands collectively underscore the paramount importance of virtue as our guiding star. They encourage us to act with wisdom, navigating complex situations with clear discernment, to exhibit courage, standing firm in our principles even when it's uncomfortable, to practice justice, ensuring fairness and respect in all our interactions, and to cultivate temperance, mastering our emotions and desires so they don't dictate our behavior. Through these practices, we build inner resilience, not as a shield against the world, but as a robust foundation that allows us to meet life's inevitable challenges, including conflict, with grace and strength. Each command, from seeking understanding over victory to embracing obstacles as opportunities, from practicing negative visualization to reflecting on our own faults, is a stepping stone on the path to becoming a more composed, effective, and ethically grounded individual. They are not isolated techniques but interconnected habits that, when woven together, form a powerful armor for the soul. Ultimately, what these 40 commands offer is a path to creating an inner citadel of peace, a concept beautifully articulated by Marcus Aurelius. He taught us that this inner fortress is impregnable, a sanctuary that external circumstances, no matter how chaotic or conflict-ridden, cannot breach. It is built not with stones and mortar, but with disciplined thoughts, virtuous actions, and an unwavering commitment to our rational nature. This citadel is not a place of escape from the world, but a vantage point from which we can engage with the world more effectively, with greater wisdom and less suffering. It is a state of mind where tranquility reigns, not because conflicts cease to exist, but because our response to them is rooted in unshakable inner calm. Now, as you reflect on all we've discussed, I encourage you to choose just one command from these 40 that resonated most deeply with you, or perhaps one you find particularly challenging, and commit to practicing it intentionally this week. It could be as simple as taking a mindful breath before responding, or as profound as actively seeking to understand another's perspective before forming your own judgment. The journey of transforming our responses to conflict is a gradual one, built one intentional step at a time. I invite you to share your experiences, your insights, or even your struggles with practicing these commands in the comments below. Your journey is valuable, and sharing it can inspire and support others in this wonderful community. Remember, the goal of Stoicism isn't perfection. It's continuous growth, a lifelong dedication to becoming a better, more virtuous version of yourself. These tools are here to support that never-ending process. If you found value in these insights, in the wisdom of the Stoics that empowers us to navigate conflict with greater calm and clarity, please do remember to show your support. A quick click on that like button truly helps this message reach more people who could benefit from these ancient yet ever-relevant teachings. And if you're eager to continue your journey into Stoicism with more practical wisdom and guidance, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. By joining our growing community, you'll ensure you don't miss out on future deep dives into philosophical concepts that can genuinely transform your life. To make absolutely certain you're always in the loop, go ahead and ring that notification bell so you'll be alerted whenever new videos are released. Beyond these videos, I always strive to provide additional resources for those who wish to explore further. So, take a moment to check the description box below this video. There, you'll find curated recommendations for books, articles, and even newsletters focused on Stoicism, offering pathways for continued learning and application of these powerful principles. These resources are carefully selected to complement what we discuss here, providing deeper context and further exercises to strengthen your inner citadel. This journey of self-improvement and philosophical exploration is a continuous one, and I'm genuinely thrilled to be